Story 1.
My best friend asked me to plan her entire wedding. 5 events. On my dime. Then she told me I wasn't allowed to actually attend any of them because her fiancé once called me pretty. So, I'm supposed to be the architect of a wedding I'm banned from. And when I pushed back, she just kept texting me venue options like I hadn't said a word. What I uncovered that night about what she'd been saying behind my back, about the blacklist she kept, about the private trauma she'd been passing around, like party gossip, detonated not just her engagement, but friendships I'd been pouring into for years. Here's the cast. I'm mid-20s female, apparently everyone's favorite unpaid event planner and emotional punching bag. Danielle is the bride. Ryan is her fiancé who honestly deserved better from the jump. Rachel is our mutual friend with receipts, literal receipts. And Kim is my actual best friend, the one who reminded me what real friendship is supposed to feel like. Let me back up, because this didn't start with a phone call. It started with years of me saying yes. I'd been the one who organized Danielle's birthday dinner since we were 21. I booked the Airbnbs for group trips. I made the spreadsheets, collected the Venmo payments, handled the deposits when someone inevitably ghosted on their share. When Danielle's car died sophomore year, I drove her to clinicals at 5 a.m. for 3 months straight. When she and Ryan first started dating and she was spiraling with anxiety about whether he liked her, I sat on her bathroom floor at 2 a.m. talking her off ledges. I did all of this because I thought that's what friends do. Kim does it for me. I do it for Kim. It's supposed to be a circle. With Danielle, it was a funnel. Everything poured in one direction. But I couldn't see that yet. Not clearly. I was too busy being useful. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was meal prepping phone wedged between my ear and shoulder, and Danielle was already mid-sentence when I picked up. She does that. Starts talking before you even say hello. Like your existence only begins when she needs something. From it. So I'm thinking 5 events. Engagement party, bridal shower, bachelorette, weekend rehearsal dinner, and obviously the reception. I want a theme for each one, not like tacky themes, like times curated, times themes, and I need you to handle vendors because you're so good at that. My knife paused mid-carrot. Danielle, that's a wedding planner's job. That's literally a profession. I know, but you do it better and you actually care about me. I'll send you my Pinterest boards tonight. I should have said no right there. I should have said times hire someone asterisk. Instead, my brain did that thing it always does, calculated the cost, weighed the friendship, and decided the labor was worth preserving the relationship. I can help coordinate, I said carefully. But I can't fund 5 events. We'd need to split. We'll figure out the money part later. Which in Danielle's language meant I'd be covering it and we'd never speak of reimbursement again. I knew this. I times knew times this. Then she said it. Casually, like she was telling me she'd switch to oat milk. Oh, and just so it's not weird, you won't actually be at any of the events. Like, not as a guest. Ryan used to have a crush on you or whatever, and I just don't want that energy on my wedding day. You get it. The carrot rolled off the cutting board and onto the floor. I watched it land. I'm sorry, what? It's not a big deal. He told me years ago he thought you were pretty and it's just been in my head. I'd rather not have that distraction. But you can still do all the planning stuff. You're literally the only person I trust with this. My chest did something strange, not a crack, more like a slow pressurization, the way a plane cabin feels before your ears pop. I stood very still in my kitchen and listened to her breathe, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. Danielle, you're asking me to plan and pay for a wedding I can't attend. I mean, when you say it like times that asterisk. How else would I say it? You're being really negative right now. I thought you'd be supportive. I told her I needed to think. She said, okay, love you, and hung up. 45 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Then again. 3 venue links, a screenshot of a floral arrangement, A text that said times, this one has a rooftop at IDK if the vibe is giving rehearsal or reception. Thoughts? Asterisks? As if the conversation hadn't happened. As if I hadn't said a single word. I called Ryan at 10 p.m. He picked up on the first ring, which told me something was already wrong on his end. She told you, he said. Not a question. Ryan, what the hell is going on? Silence. Then, can you meet me and Rachel at Waffle House, the one on Federal? Rachel was already in the booth when I got there, laptop, open phone, face down on the table like a weapon she was keeping in reserve. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her before, not angry, not sad. Asterisk. Ready? Asterisk. Sit down, she said. There's more. Ryan slid into the seat across from me. He looked hollowed out. He kept turning his coffee cup in circles without drinking from it. She has a list, Rachel said. An actual list. Every woman Ryan has ever called pretty, mentioned positively, or looked at too long in Danielle's opinion. You're at the top, but there are 11 names. My stomach dropped. A times blacklist asterisk. Rachel turned her laptop toward me. Group chat screenshots. Danielle's words unmistakable. Her syntax, her emojis, her particular way of typing LMAOO with exactly 3 O's. And there in a chat I'd never been added to was my name next to a message that made my vision narrow to a pinpoint. Asterisk. She's literally been Baker acted before, like, she's not stable enough to handle being told no. Watch her spiral. Lol, asterisk. My mental health history. Passed around like party gossip. I looked up at Ryan. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Rachel reached across the table and opened another screenshot. She told him about you too, Ryan, Rachel said quietly. The thing you told her in confidence. About your stepdad. Ryan's coffee cup stopped moving. The sound he made wasn't crying exactly. It was closer to something structural giving way, a support beam finally snapping after years of invisible rot. Rachel slid her phone to the center of the table. I have everything. Every text, every chat, timestamped. She looked at me. I looked at Ryan. Ryan wiped his face with the back of his hand and said 5 words that changed everything. Put it in the group chat. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't write a preamble. I didn't craft some diplomatic message about having a difficult conversation. I just opened the group chat, the main one, 23 people, the one Danielle herself had named Ride or Dies, and I started uploading. Screenshot after screenshot. Long Samsung captures that scrolled for days. The blacklist. The Baker Act comments. The mocking. The private trauma she turned into group entertainment. Every message timestamped, every participant visible, every LMAO with exactly 3 O's preserved in digital amber. Rachel watched from across the Waffle House booth, her coffee untouched. Ryan stared at the table with the particular stillness of someone who'd already detonated and was now just watching the debris settle. My phone started buzzing before the last screenshot finished uploading. The chat erupted. Not slowly, instantaneously, like a flock of birds startled off a wire. Question marks. What? Someone typing, stopping typing again? Then Danielle's name appeared at the top of the screen. Asterisk. This is so out of context. LOL asterisk. Then times. She's literally doing this because she's mad she wasn't invited, asterisk. Then, when no one responded to that times, it was a joke. Get over it. Asterisk. Ryan's phone buzzed. He looked at it, showed me the screen. Danielle, times. Baby, call me right now. She's manipulating you. You know how she is. Asterisk. He typed 4 words, times, keep the ring. We're done. Asterisk. Then he blocked her. Right there in the booth syrup sticky table between us, a waitress refilling waters 3 feet away, like the world wasn't rearranging itself. He blocked her and set his phone face down and pressed both palms against his eyes. I told her about my stepdad on our 6-month anniversary, he said, into his hands. I'd never told anyone, I thought. His voice cracked. I thought that's what you do when you love someone. Rachel put her hand on his arm. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The fallout took 12 hours. By morning, Danielle's damage control campaign was in full swing. Her angle was that I was upset I wasn't invited, and that's why I was sabotaging her and Ryan. She was telling everyone who would listen that she felt Ryan valued me above her, so that's why she initially didn't want me there, and that she'd invite me if I talked Ryan out of leaving her and let her pick my outfit. The audacity of that offer times let me dress you like a doll and you can earn your way back into my wedding times would have been funny if it weren't so clarifying. Because here's what her "it's a joke, get over it" mindset actually did. It revealed far more about those considered friends and associates than I'm comfortable admitting. People I'd ignored red flags from to keep mutuals. People I genuinely missed the truth about because I was too busy being useful to look up. The messages came in waves. Some people were horrified, supportive, furious on Ryan's behalf. But 4 of them, 4 out of 15 people I'd considered close, responded with variations of the same deflection. Asterisk. I mean, she's always been like that. You knew what she was. Asterisk. Asterisk. This feels like drama I don't want to be in the middle of. Asterisk. Asterisk. You're kind of blowing this up for no reason. Asterisk. And then in a separate thread I was added to, accidentally before being quickly removed, the truth I'd been circling for years. One admitted she'd only maintained the friendship because I always drove. Another said I was useful for trip planning. A third referenced the free babysitting I'd done for her son 47 times. I'd counted once during an insomniac, 3 a.m., as though it were a service she was entitled to. The fourth said, and I quote, "She's great for double dates because she makes everyone look low maintenance by comparison." I read that last one sitting on my bathroom floor. The same bathroom floor where I'd talked Danielle through her anxiety about Ryan. The same position, the same tile cold against my legs, except this time no one was sitting with me. I called Kim. She picked up on the second ring, and the moment I heard her voice, I couldn't hold it anymore. I feel dumb, I told her. I feel really, really dumb. And close to tears. I cut my mother off for a lot of these same behaviors, and then I let it replicate. I let the same dynamics walk right in, wearing different faces, and I times hosted times them. Kim was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're not dumb. You're someone who was trained to tolerate this. There's a difference." Rachel wanted to go nuclear. She had Danielle's nursing program director's email pulled up, screenshots of HIPAA-adjacent gossip Danielle had shared about patients, a draft letter that would have ended her career before it started. "Don't," I said. "She weaponized your Baker Act." "I know. And I'm not going to become someone who weaponizes back." Rachel stared at me for a long time. Then she closed the laptop. I blocked Danielle that afternoon. Then the 4. 5 contacts removed in under a minute. Years of one-directional friendship erased with 5 thumb movements. Ryan texted me that night, "Times I think I picked her because she felt familiar. I think that's the worst part." Asterisk. I knew exactly what he meant. The way abuse teaches you to recognize its rhythm as love. The way you keep finding yourself in the same room with different furniture. There are people I need to cut off. Surprisingly, it's a small number. 4 of the 15 are genuinely gone. The rest are navigating their own reckonings with what they witnessed, and I'm giving them space to do that. I'm not going to send Danielle's text to her nursing school. I'm not going to write a public call out. I'm not going to do any of the things the internet would find satisfying. I'm going to sit with the quiet, aching fact that I was everyone's workhorse and almost no one's friend, and I'm going to learn slowly, imperfectly with Kim on speed dial, to stop building my worth out of what I can do for people who would never do it for me. The carrot is still on my kitchen floor. I haven't picked it up yet. I'm not sure why that detail matters, but it does.
Story 2.
There's something uniquely soul-crushing about watching someone steal the thing you built with your own hands, then smile at you while the room applauds them for it. So here's my question. What would you do if the person who took everything from you, your promotion, your projects, your name on your own work, couldn't even explain what they stole? Because that's exactly how I destroyed him. I'm Jake, 28, the kind of guy who pours art into everything he touches, sculptures, music, even corporate presentation. Derek is 31, my new boss, a man whose entire career is built on other people's talent, and a smile that could sell you your own shoes. And Sarah, she's 26, my colleague, quietly furious and about to become the best co-conspirator I've ever had. The promotion was supposed to be mine. I don't say that with entitlement. I say it with the quiet certainty of a man who spent 14 months redesigning our entire client onboarding workflow, who stayed until midnight, building interactive presentation decks that made the VP of operations literally stand up, clap, who sculpted a proposal so clean and elegant it became the template 3 departments now use. I say it because the hiring panel told me to my face that I was the front runner. Then Derek walked into the final interview with a portfolio I'd never seen him build and a smile that could sell you your own shoes twice. Senior Manager of Innovation. They gave him the title on a Tuesday. By Thursday, he'd sent a company-wide email announcing a team celebration at an upscale bar downtown. The email was warm, generous, full of exclamation points. The fine print was less festive. Each team member was expected to contribute $40 toward the venue and catering for his promotion party that we were throwing for him with our money. I remember Sarah reading the email at her desk, her jaw doing this slow tightening thing like she was physically biting back words. She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us said anything. We both paid. That was the first lesson in Derek's economy. Everything flows upward. The second lesson came fast. Within 2 weeks, Derek restructured our workload in ways that looked strategic on paper, but felt surgical in practice. My project timelines doubled. Deadlines compressed. I went from leaving at 6 to leaving at 9, then 10, then not leaving at all some nights. My sculpting table at home gathered dust. My guitar case stayed closed so long the latches started to stick. I told myself it was temporary. New manager, new expectations. I'd adjust. But here's what I started noticing. The overtime wasn't distributed evenly. 3 of us carried 80% of the load while the rest of the team coasted. And the 3 of us, we were the ones who'd been vocally supportive of my promotion. Coincidence is a word people use when they don't want to see the pattern. I know a lot of you would have suggested that I switch companies. I know it's an easier fix. But the thing is, I had worked for 5 years in this company and I didn't want to leave it just because some jerk felt entitled to exploit me. I wanted to stay and prove my mettle. Otherwise it would be just like running away from the situation. I didn't want to give him that sense of satisfaction. Call it ego or whatever, but this is how it is. Why is it that we don't want to leave a toxic work environment? Do we want the last laugh? What point are we trying to make? Why do we feel that we're running away from something and not running to something better? I didn't have answers then. I just had stubbornness and a clenched jaw. Then came the report incident, and stubbornness stopped being enough. Sarah had compiled a quarterly analytics report, thorough, accurate, cross-referenced. She'd sent it to Derek for review before the department meeting. What she didn't know was that Derek edited the file after she submitted it. changed 3 key data points. Small changes, but enough to make the projections look incoherent when the director started asking questions. Sarah stood in that conference room while the director frowned at her numbers. Her voice stayed steady, but I could see her hands trembling against the table edge, fingertips white. "These projections don't align with Q2 actuals," the director said. "They should," Sarah started. "I pulled directly from..." "I flagged concerns about this report last week," Derek interrupted, leaning back in his chair with his performative reluctance, like it pained him to say it. "I should have followed up more closely." "That's on me as her manager." The room heard accountability. I heard a man throwing someone under a bus while pretending to jump in front of it. Sarah's performance review that quarter included a note about attention to detail. She found out later. She came to my desk, sat down, and said nothing for a full minute. Then very quietly, he changed the file, Jake. "I know. I have the original version? Save it. Save everything from now on." That was the moment Sarah stopped being my colleague and became something else entirely. Something sharper. But Derek wasn't done with me. Not even close. Because what came next was worse than overtime, worse than humiliation. It was hope. He assigned me the Meridian Project, a full-scale innovation proposal for our biggest client. Creative direction, visual design, strategic narrative. It was everything I was built for. For 3 months, I poured myself into it. I sculpted that project the way I sculpt clay, with patience, with obsession, with my fingerprints pressed into every surface. Late nights returned, but this time I didn't mind. I was creating again. The presentation was scheduled for a Friday. I prepared 46 slides. I rehearsed until the transitions lived in my muscle memory. Thursday evening, Derek called me into his office. "Change of plans," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "I'll be presenting Meridian tomorrow. Director wants senior leadership front and center on this one." My chest went hollow. "It's my project." "It's the company's project, Jake." He finally looked at me, that smile. "I'll make sure to mention the team's contributions." He didn't. I sat in that room the next morning and watched Derek present my work, my architecture, my language, my creative vision to a room full of executives. My name appeared nowhere. Not on the deck. Not in his remarks. Not even in the follow-up email. The room applauded. Derek shook the director's hand. And something inside me finished dying and started building something new. That night, Sarah met me in the parking garage. She leaned against her car, arms crossed, eyes like flint. "I have an idea," she said. "But you're going to have to trust me." I looked at her. She looked at me. "Derek's presenting the Helios proposal to the director next month," she continued. "What if we make sure that this time, when he steals the work..." She paused. A slow, dangerous smile. "He steals exactly what we want him to." We spent 3 weeks building Helios. Or rather, we spent 3 weeks building 2 versions of Helios. The real version was elegant, a sustainability integration framework that would save the client $2.3 million annually. I designed it with the same obsessive precision I bring to everything. Every data point verified. Every projection stress tested. Every slide crafted like a sculpture. Each element load-bearing. The decoy version looked identical. Same formatting, same visual language, same confident tone. But Sarah and I had seeded it with errors, subtle ones, the kind that wouldn't jump out on a casual read but would collapse under the slightest interrogation. Revenue projections built on a formula that double-counted Q3 returns. A market analysis that cited a study which didn't exist. Implementation timelines that contradicted the budget allocations 3 slides later. The trap wasn't the errors, the trap was the depth. Derek never went deeper than surface level on anything he stole. He memorized talking points, not architecture. He learned the times what times, but never the times why asterisk. We were betting his entire career on that pattern holding. Sarah left the decoy file in the shared project folder on a Tuesday, timestamped and version logged. The real version lived on an encrypted drive in my apartment next to my dusty sculpting table. Wednesday morning, the file's access log showed a download at 11:47 p.m. Derek's credentials. Sarah pinged me one word. Times. Hooked. Asterisk. The presentation was scheduled for the following Friday. Director Morrison, 2 VPs, and a client liaison. High stakes. Exactly the kind of stage Derek couldn't resist. Thursday afternoon, Derek called me into his office. Same posture, same laptop staring performance, same script. I'll be handling the Helios presentation tomorrow. Director wants. Senior leadership front and center, I finished. Got it. He looked up, surprised. I think he expected resistance. Instead, I nodded and walked out. My hands were steady. My pulse was not. That night I rehearsed until 2 a.m. Not the decoy. The real thing. Friday. Conference room B, 10th floor. The long table, the projection screen, the filtered water nobody ever drinks. I sat in the second row with Sarah beside me. She had a manila folder in her lap, closed, unmarked. Her fingers rested on it like a pianist waiting for the downbeat. Derek opened strong. He always did. That was his gift, the performance. Confident posture, warm eye contact, the slight lean forward that said, times I believe in this asterisk. He walked through the first 10 slides with the fluency of a man who'd built every pixel himself. Director Morrison nodded along. The VPs took notes. Then the questions started. Walk me through the revenue model, Morrison said. Casual. Conversational. The way a man asks a question he already knows the answer to. Derek smiled. Absolutely. So as you can see on slide 14, the projected returns are based on... The Q3 figures, Morrison interrupted. They seem high. How are you accounting for the seasonal adjustment? A pause. Barely half a second, but I saw it, the micro-freeze behind Derek's eyes. The moment a man reaches for knowledge that isn't there. The seasonal adjustment is factored into the baseline projections, Derek said smoothly. Where? Show me. Derek clicked back to slide 11. He stared at it. The formula was right there and it was wrong, and he didn't know it was wrong because he'd never understood what right looked like. It's the baseline here, incorporates... Derek. Morrison leaned forward. The implementation timeline on slide 22 allocates 4 months for phase 2, but your budget only funds 3. Which is correct. Silence. Derek's jaw worked. I watched his hand drift toward the laptop touchpad, scrolling, searching for an answer that the decoy would never give him. That's a formatting discrepancy, he tried. The actual? And the Whitfield study you cite on slide 18, Morrison continued, voice flat. My team couldn't locate it. Can you provide the source? The room had gone very still. The VPs had stopped writing. The client liaison was looking at her hands. Derek's face flushed from the collar upward, a slow red tide. His mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I stood up. Director Morrison, if I may. Every head turned. Derek's eyes found mine, and for the first time, I saw something behind the smile, the raw animal recognition of a man watching his own trap close. I connected my drive to the secondary display. The real Helios opened on screen, clean correct mine. The Q3 revenue model uses a weighted seasonal adjustment detailed here. I walked them through. Every question Morrison had asked, I answered with the precision of someone who'd built the thing from the foundation up. I corrected every seeded error not by naming them as traps, but by simply presenting work so clearly mine that the contrast did the talking. Then I said the sentence I'd been carrying for months. I'd also like to note that a similar discrepancy occurred with the Meridian project presentation in March. The original project files with my metadata and version history are available for review. Sarah opened her manila folder, placed 3 documents on the table, time-stamped file logs, original report versions, a paper trail that stretched back 8 months. Morrison looked at the documents, looked at Derek, said nothing. The silence lasted 11 seconds. I counted. Derek Morrison said, "My office." Now, I know a lot of you suggested that I should have switched companies months ago. I know it's an easier fix. But the thing is, I worked 5 years in this company and I didn't want to leave it just because some jerk felt entitled to exploit me. I wanted to stay and prove my mettle. Call it ego or whatever, but this is how it is. The investigation took 2 weeks. Sarah filed her formal complaint about the falsified quarterly report, complete with her original file and Derek's edited version. 3 other colleagues came forward with their own stories, smaller thefts, quieter erasures, the same pattern wearing different masks. Derek's name disappeared from the employee portal on a Wednesday. No announcement, no farewell email, no explanation. He simply stopped existing in our systems the way a shadow disappears when you turn on the light. Our team now reports directly to Morrison. My name is on my projects. Sarah got her performance review amended. Last Tuesday, she sent me a message. Times, check your mail. Asterisk. A new set of sculpting tools. Professional grade. The card read Times, build something. Asterisk. Last night I opened my guitar case for the first time in 7 months. The latches stuck, then gave. The strings were dead, so I restrung them. Tuned each one by ear the way I learned as a kid, slowly listening for the moment the pitch stops fighting and settles into itself. I played for 2 hours. Nothing polished. Nothing performative. Just a man in his apartment making something that was entirely his own. The sculptor reclaims his craft.
Story 3.
My neighbor poisoned my dog with cannabis brownies, mocked my sick daughter to my face, and genuinely believed his daddy's money made him untouchable. He was half right, his father's money did protect him. Until we figured out how to turn that exact protection into a weapon. So here's the short version. A trust fund nightmare moved in next door last Christmas and spent the next several months systematically terrorizing my family. Police couldn't touch him. Petitions went nowhere. He escalated until he hurt our dog. That's when my wife and I stopped playing nice and started playing smart, and the fallout reached places he never saw coming. I'm Mark late 30s and I'm not someone who looks for trouble. My wife Sarah is a freelance writer, mid 30s, sharper than anyone gives her credit for. Our neighbor was Chad Reynolds, rich, bored, and cruel. His father Gerald is a well-known businessman and philanthropist. And then there's Adam, our dog, who never did a thing to anybody. We'd lived in Willowdale for 6 years before Chad Reynolds showed up. Quiet street. The kind of place where people wave from their driveways and nobody locks their side gates. The house next door had been empty for 3 months after the previous owners retired to Florida, and when the moving trucks rolled in the week before Christmas, I figured I'd do what anyone does, walk over, introduce myself, offer a hand. Chad was standing in his driveway directing movers like a general commanding troops. Designer sunglasses. Polo shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. I crossed the lawn with a six-pack and my best neighborly smile. "Hey, I'm Mark." welcome to the neighborhood. He looked at the beer, then at me, then back at the beer. Didn't take it. Cool, he said, and turned away. I stood there for a moment holding the six-pack like an idiot, then walked home. Sarah was watching from the kitchen window. She raised an eyebrow. I shrugged. Over the next few weeks, we tried again. Sarah collected a package that sat on his porch in the rain, left it at his door with a friendly note. He never acknowledged it. I waved every time I saw him. Nothing. Not hostility exactly, just a complete refusal to register our existence like we were furniture he hadn't ordered. Then came the trash incident. Our elderly neighbors, a couple in their 70s, the Patels found garbage bags dumped on their front lawn 3 mornings in a row. Takeout containers, beer cans, the kind of waste that comes from someone who entertains frequently and doesn't care where the aftermath lands. Mr. Patel mentioned it to me over the fence, shaking his head more in confusion than anger. 2 days later, Chad cornered me in the driveway. Tell your old friends to stop accusing me of dumping trash on their property. His jaw was tight. I don't appreciate being slandered. Nobody accused you of anything, Chad. I know how this works. People see the new guy, the guy with money, and they want to make problems. He stepped closer. Don't make problems for me, Mark. That night I ordered a security camera. Installed it the next weekend, angled to cover the side yard between our houses. I told myself it was just a precaution. It wasn't enough. February. My daughter Lily, 9 years old, came down with typhoid. 103 fever, couldn't keep food down, spent 3 days in the hospital before we brought her home to recover. She needed rest. Absolute quiet. Doctor's orders. The night we brought her home, Chad threw a party. Not a casual get-together. A full-scale event. Bass thumping through our walls at 11 p.m. I could feel it in my daughter's bedroom floor. She was crying not from the noise, but from the headache the noise created, pressing her palms against her temples while Sarah held her. I went over. Knocked on Chad's door. He opened it with a drink in his hand, music blasting behind him, and a grin that told me he already knew why I was there. My daughter's seriously ill. She just got out of the hospital. Could you please turn it down? He leaned against the doorframe. It's a weekend, Mark. She has typhoid. She can't. Why do people like you even have kids? He said it casually, like commenting on the weather. If you can't handle basic life, maybe don't reproduce. My hands balled into fists at my sides. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to swing. I didn't. I called the police instead. They came. They talked to Chad. He turned on the charm, offered them water, laughed about a misunderstanding between neighbors. They left. The music dipped for 20 minutes, then climbed right back. Lily didn't sleep until 4 a.m. March. Sarah had been building her freelance career for 2 years, and she'd finally landed a major client, a marketing firm that wanted a long-term content contract. The introductory Zoom call was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. She'd prepared for a week. At exactly 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes before her call, a landscaping crew arrived at Chad's property. Not at his backyard. At the strip of land directly outside my home office window where Sarah had set up. Jackhammers, a concrete saw. The kind of noise that makes your teeth vibrate. Sarah tried closing windows. Tried noise-canceling headphones. Tried moving to the bedroom. Nothing worked. The walls shook. She ended up having to go to her friend's house just to attend that call. Arriving flustered and 15 minutes late, apologizing to people she was trying to impress. She got the contract. Barely. But when she came home, she sat at the kitchen table and didn't speak for a long time. Determined not to let Chad get the best of me this time, I decided to take a different approach. I reached out to some of the other neighbors who had been equally affected by his behavior. We formed a collective complaint, including a petition signed by all the affected households. We hoped that the combined voices of our community would finally make a difference. With our collective complaint in hand, we presented it to the local authorities, hoping that they would take the matter more seriously this time. It was a small victory when they assured us that they would investigate the noise disturbance and Chad's disregard for the peace and safety of the neighborhood. Although it was too early to say whether this would bring about any real change, we felt heard. Weeks passed. The investigation amounted to a single warning letter. Chad framed it and hung it on his porch where we could all see it. April. A windstorm knocked debris from our yard onto Chad's patio furniture. Branches leaves a section of old lattice. I cleaned it up the next morning, but he'd already seen it. You're gonna pay to replace that chair cushion. It was wind, Chad. An act of God. Then God owes me $400, and since he's not here, you'll do. I'm not paying for weather damage. Something shifted in his face. The amusement drained out. What replaced it was colder. You'll regret that. 3 days later, I came home from work, and Adam didn't greet me at the door. I found him in the backyard, lying on his side, panting, pupils blown, wide legs twitching. Sarah was already on the phone with the emergency vet, her voice cracking. Lily was standing at the back door, frozen. We rushed him in. The vet ran tests. Cannabis toxicity. Someone had fed him edibles, chocolate brownies laced with enough THC to seriously hurt a 60-pound dog. I knew. But knowing isn't proof. That night, after Adam was stabilized and sleeping at the vet's office, I sat in the dark and pulled up the security camera footage. And there it was. Clear as daylight. Chad Reynolds leaning over our fence at 2:17 p.m., tossing something into our yard. Adam trotting over, eating it. I watched it 3 times. My hands were shaking. Not from anger anymore. From something quieter. Something that had finished calculating. I showed Sarah. She watched it once, set the phone down, and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. His father, she said. I know exactly what to do. Sarah had been researching Chad for weeks. Not casually, the way she researches everything with spreadsheets and browser tabs, and the quiet intensity that made her so good at content strategy. I didn't know it until that night, sitting in the kitchen with Adam's vet bill on the counter and the security footage burned into my retinas. Gerald Reynolds, she said, turning her laptop toward me. Chad's father. Real estate development 2 commercial plazas sits on the board of 3 nonprofits. The Willowdale Youth Foundation, the Regional Arts Council, a children's hospital charity. She scrolled. He gave the keynote at a philanthropy gala last October. His entire brand is community stewardship. And Chad. Trust fund. No job title I can find. His house was purchased through a family LLC. She paused. Gerald Reynolds has spent 30 years building a reputation. His son is a liability he doesn't know about yet. I stared at the screen. Gerald's face smiled back from a charity website. Silver hair, tailored suit, the kind of man who shakes hands with mayors. What are you thinking? Sarah closed the laptop. I'm thinking that Chad doesn't care about fines, warnings, or police visits because none of it touches the thing that actually protects him. His father's name. His father's money. His father's circle. She met my eyes. So we stopped talking to Chad. We talked to the circle. It took 2 weeks to build. Sarah created a Willowdale Community Watch page. Nothing aggressive, nothing defamatory, just a neighborhood social media group. She invited every household on the street. The Patels joined. The family across the road. Even people 3 blocks over who'd heard rumors. Then she started posting. The first video was the trash. Security camera footage timestamped showing Chad tossing bags onto the Patel's lawn at 1 a.m. No commentary. Just the clip and a caption times concerned about repeated dumping on elderly residents' property. Anyone else experiencing this? Asterisk. 18 shares in 2 hours. The second post was the noise complaint documentation. The petition. The warning letter Chad had framed on his porch. Screenshots of the police report from the night Lily couldn't sleep. Sarah laid it out like a case file, dates, times, outcomes. She tagged the local community board. 40 shares. Comments started rolling in. The third post was Adam. Sarah edited the security footage herself. Chad leaning over the fence. The toss. Adam eating. Then a photo of Adam at the vet IV in his leg, eyes glassy. Then the toxicology report. She didn't write anything inflammatory. She didn't have to. The footage spoke in a language everyone understood. That post hit 200 shares overnight. And Sarah, who understood algorithms the way mechanics understand engines, had already seeded it into the networks that mattered. She tagged Gerald's business page, his nonprofit affiliations, the Philanthropy Gala's event page. Not Chad. Gerald. Every tag was a thread connecting father-to-son reputation to reality. By Thursday, Gerald's business rivals had found it. A competing developer shared the video with the comment times. This is the family behind Reynolds Community Properties. Interesting definition of community. Asterisk. By Friday, the Willowdale Youth Foundation issued a statement distancing itself from individuals whose conduct contradicts our values. They didn't name Gerald. They didn't have to. Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Chad was at our door. I opened it with my phone already recording. Sarah stood behind me, live streaming to the community page. Take it down. His face was blotched, red veins visible at his temples. Take all of it down, right now. Take what down, Chad? You know what? My father called me at 6 a.m. 6. Because of your little... He jabbed a finger at Sarah. Your wife's little project. Everything on that page is documented fact. Security camera footage. Police reports. A veterinary toxicology report. I kept my voice flat. Which part would you like us to retract? You think you're clever. You think this. He stepped forward. I didn't move. I will bury you. I will make your life... You're on a live stream right now, Chad. He froze. Looked at Sarah's phone. The red dot. The viewer count climbing. His mouth opened. Closed. He looked like a man who'd reached for a weapon and found his holster empty. He left without another word. The live stream got 300 views before Sarah took it down that evening. But by then, screenshots were everywhere. Gerald's philanthropic associations had already released a second, more pointed statement. Noise violation fines previously ignored were suddenly enforced. The framed warning letter disappeared from Chad's porch. Local teenagers spray-painted Time's Neighbor of the Year times across his garage door. I didn't condone it. I didn't scrub it off either. By mid-May, Chad's house went quiet. Not the quiet of someone being considerate. The quiet of absence. His car disappeared. The blinds stayed drawn. Packages accumulated on the porch until someone not Chad collected them. The house stayed locked through June, July, August. Lawn unmowed. A for rent sign appeared in September, posted by a property management company linked to Gerald's LLC. In October, a family moved in. Couple in their early 30s. A boy around 7 who spent the first afternoon chasing a soccer ball across the front yard. I watched from the kitchen window. Sarah came up beside me. "You going over?" She nodded. Understood. A week later, the father caught me checking the mail. "Hey, I'm David. We just moved in. Mark." I shook his hand. "Welcome to Willowdale." He smiled. I smiled back. And that was enough. Adam healed fully. He still won't eat brownies, which the vet says is actually a sign of intelligence. Lily started 5th grade without incident. Sarah's client contract renewed for a 2nd year. And the lesson I carry isn't complicated. Chad believed his father's money made him untouchable. He was half right. Gerald's reputation was the shield. But shields only work when the person holding them doesn't know what you've done. We didn't overpower Chad. We just made sure his father could see him clearly. The rest took care of itself.
Story 4.
My brother walked into my bakery last month to make a sales pitch. And the second he saw me behind the counter, he turned white, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out without saying a single word. Because 12 years ago, he told me I was dead to him for being just a janitor. The janitor who paid for his entire college education. So here's the short version. I dropped out of school at 17 to scrub floors and mow lawns so my little brother could get his degree. He repaid me by erasing me from his life. And when he finally resurfaced, it was because his company needed my business. Except he didn't know the bakery owner he was pitching to was me. I'm Janet, 31 female. My husband is Marcus. My brother is Alan, he's 29. And his wife Priya, well, she's the one who finally told me the lies he'd been telling about me all along. But to understand why my brother's face drained of color that morning, you need to go back to where it started. To the apartment that smelled like pine sol and lavender fabric softener, because those were the 2 scents my mother carried home on her skin every single night. Our mom, Gloria, cleaned office buildings. She cleaned them 6 days a week, sometimes 7, and she believed, with a faith that bordered on religious, that education was the only door worth knocking on. She couldn't give us much, but she gave us that belief. She drilled it into both of us. I was 15 when she first got sick. Lupus, the doctor said, though, it took months of misdiagnosis before anyone bothered to listen to a cleaning woman describe her own symptoms accurately. By the time I was 16, she couldn't work full shifts anymore. By 17, she couldn't work at all. Alan was 15 then. Bright. Genuinely bright, the kind of kid teachers pulled aside to talk about scholarships and potential. Mom would light up talking about his grades. And I'd light up watching her light up. So, when the math stopped working, rent plus medical bills plus groceries minus 1 income, I did the only thing that made sense to me. I dropped out. Took over Mom's cleaning contracts. Added lawn care on weekends because a neighbor offered me his old push mower. I was 17 hauling a vacuum cleaner onto the 6:15 a.m. bus. Scrubbing bathroom tiles in office parks until my knuckles cracked and bled. Then coming home to make sure Alan had dinner and a quiet place to study. He didn't ask me to do this. I want to be clear about that. He didn't ask. But he also didn't say no. Mom died when I was 19, quietly in a hospital bed I was still making payments on 2 years later. Alan was 17. I became his legal guardian. I kept cleaning, he kept studying. And for a while, a brief fragile, while we were okay. Sad, broken, but okay. He'd sometimes leave a note on the kitchen counter times, "Thanks for dinner, Jay." Asterisk, small thing. Meant the world. He got into a good college. Not Ivy League, but solid with partial financial aid that covered maybe 40%. The rest was me. Every tuition installment, every textbook, every meal plan, payment that was floor polish and grass clippings converted into his future. I kept a notebook where I tracked what I spent. Not because I wanted him to repay me dollar for dollar, but because Mom would have wanted to see the numbers. To know it was going somewhere. The first year, Alan called every Sunday. The second year, every other week. By junior year, I was lucky to get a text back. I told myself it was normal. College kids get busy. They grow up, grow out. I told myself a lot of things. Then came Tiffany. I met her exactly once. I'd taken the train to visit Alan for his birthday, brought a homemade cake because I couldn't afford a bakery one, which is ironic now. I found them at a cafe near campus. Tiffany was blonde immaculate, the kind of girl who looked like she'd never touched a sponge in her life. Alan introduced me as Janet with no context. Not my sister. Not the person putting me through school. Just Janet. I extended my hand. Tiffany looked at it then at Alan and laughed. Not a mean laugh, worse. A confused one. Like she couldn't process why this person was touching her. On the subway platform afterward, I overheard them. They didn't know I was still within earshot, or maybe they didn't care. Tiffany's voice carried the way entitled voices do. She stinks of detergent, Alan. Like literally. Is she your Times, Made Times or something? I waited for him to correct her. My fingers tightened around the cake box. She's nobody, he said. Just someone my mom used to know. My legs went numb. I stood on that platform for 2 full trains before I could move. Things deteriorated fast after that. Alan stopped answering calls entirely. When he did pick up, he was clipped, irritated, like I was a telemarketer interrupting his real life. After graduation, he got a corporate sales job, entry level, but he talked about it like he'd been appointed CEO. I called to congratulate him. He let it ring. 6 months later, I called to ask gently, carefully about the money. Not all of it. Not even most. I was behind on rent. I just needed enough to cover 2 months while I picked up extra shifts. He laughed. Actually laughed. Then he said the words, I still hear when I can't sleep. You want a reward for mopping floors. That was your choice, Janet. I didn't make you drop out. Don't put your failures on me, and honestly, stop calling. You're dead to me. He hung up. Changed his number. Moved without forwarding an address. I was 20 years old. For the next 11 years, I had no brother. I had bleach raw hands and a push mower, and eventually, Marcus, who walked into a diner where I was cleaning tables and asked me with total sincerity what the best thing on the menu was. I told him the coffee was terrible. He ordered 2 cups. Marcus was delivering for a food logistics company when we started dating. And he's the one who first tasted my banana bread and said, you need to sell this. It was only last year that we were able to rent out a small bakery corner of our own. It might sound like a fairy tale, but trust me, it wasn't. There were times when we had to sleep on empty stomachs because we didn't get any orders in a week. It took its own sweet time to click, but I'm really grateful for everything we have now. I was a cleaner with no parents but a narcissistic brother who despised me and abandoned me. Now I have something of my own. I have a husband and a 3-year-old daughter. What else could I have asked for? So when Alan walked into my bakery 4 weeks ago with a company lanyard and a rehearsed pitch about wholesale cleaning supply contracts for small businesses, when he looked up from his tablet, saw my face, and went, the color of old paper I understood something with perfect clarity. He hadn't come to find me. He'd been assigned my account. He left that day without a word. But 3 days later, he came back. And this time, he didn't leave quietly. He came back on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays are when I do the cinnamon rolls and the whole shop smells like butter and brown sugar, and my regulars know to show up early. Alan walked in at 1040 a.m., wearing a different suit than the first time, sharper, darker like armor. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the counter, set a stack of paperwork down, and addressed my employee Keisha, who was boxing up a dozen muffins for a church order. I need to speak with the business owner regarding a supply contract. The Times, actual Times decision maker. Keisha looked at me. I was 3 feet away restocking napkin dispensers. That's her, Keisha said. Alan's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. He still wouldn't turn his head. He spoke to the air between us, this bizarre middle distance, as if acknowledging me directly would cost him something he couldn't afford. I've been assigned this account. I'm going to need you to sign the onboarding documents and confirm your quarterly supply needs. This is strictly professional. Alan, I said. Just his name. Quiet. Something cracked behind his eyes. Not softness, pressure. The kind that builds before an explosion. Don't, he said. Don't do that. Don't say my name like you know me. You're a client. Sign the paperwork, or don't. 2 of my regulars were sitting by the window. Mrs. Okafor had her granddaughter on her lap. They were both watching. I'm not signing anything, I said. And you should go. That's when he threw the folder. Not at me onto the counter hard enough that the pages fanned out and one slid into the muffin display. His voice went up a full register. You think you can play games with me. You think because you run some little Times, cake shop Times, you're somebody. Now, I have a quota. I have accounts across this entire district. You are a line item, Janet. You are a Times line item. Asterisk. My hands were steady. I noticed that with a kind of detached surprise. 11 years ago, his voice could make my whole body flinch. Now I was standing behind my own counter in my own shop, and my hands were steady. Get out of my store, I said. Don't come back. He left. Knocked over the tip jar on his way out. Quarters rolled across the tile like small fleeing things. Keisha looked at me. Who Times was Times that... Nobody, I said. And then I heard the echo of that word, his word, from a subway platform 12 years ago, and I had to go sit in the back room for 10 minutes with my face in my hands. Marcus found out that evening. Not because I told him, because Keisha told him. She'd been worried enough to text him, and when he came home and saw my face, he didn't ask if I was okay. He knew better. He sat next to me on the couch, put his hand on the back of my neck, and said, "Tell me everything." So I did. What Marcus did next, he did, without asking my permission, and I'll be honest, I'm still deciding how I feel about that. He called every bakery owner and small business contact we'd built relationships with over the past year. You know, I wasn't even good with writing on the internet stuff until very recently. When we opened our shop, other local shop owners suggested that we create our online page and all. Yes, we paid someone to do that, but I had to learn the skill. The point is, we'd built a real network. Small business owners talk. They protect each other. Marcus told them what happened, that a sales rep had come into our shop, thrown paperwork, screamed at me in front of customers. He had the CCTV footage. He filed a formal complaint with Alan's company. Within 2 weeks, 4 businesses in our district severed their contracts. Alan's company launched an internal review. He was terminated. He called me from an unknown number at 11 p.m. on a Thursday. My daughter was asleep in the next room. "You witch," he said. His voice was ragged wet. "You vindictive, jealous witch. You couldn't stand seeing me succeed, could you? You had to drag me down to your level." "Alan, I Times built Times myself. Everything I have, I earned. You mopped floors. That's all you ever did. And now you've destroyed my career because you can't handle Mom's money, I said. My money. My knuckles cracking open every winter. My education, Alan. I gave you mine. Silence. Then, you chose that? I hung up. His wife called the next day. Priya. Soft voice, careful words, a baby crying in the background. She told me Alan had said I was an estranged relative who'd stolen money from their mother. That I'd been the one to cut times and times off. That I was jealous of his success. And had harassed him for years. She said, I just want to know what's true. I told her. All of it. The cleaning contracts, the tuition payments, the notebook I still had in a drawer. She was quiet for a long time. He told me he had no family, she finally said. Then he told me he had family, but they were toxic. I'm starting to understand which version is real. Before she hung up, she asked if there was anything Alan could do. Any path forward? He can apologize, I said. Not to get his job back. Not to fix anything. Just to say it. Just once. Priya said she'd tell him. That was 3 weeks ago. He hasn't called. I still have the notebook. The one where I tracked every dollar, tuition, textbooks, meal plans, the winter coat he needed sophomore year. The pages are soft now, the ink fading. Sometimes I open it and run my thumb across Mom's handwriting in the margins because she'd started it before she got too sick to hold a pen. Little notes times, Alan's biology textbook, $84. Worth every penny. My boy. Asterisk. My boy. I don't want revenge. I never did. What I wanted was for my brother to look at me and see what Mom would have seen, someone who kept the promise. Someone who held the family together with pine sol and grass clippings and 17-year-old hands. He can't do that. Maybe he never could. Maybe the shame of where he came from is so enormous that I'll always be the living proof he needs to destroy. I pray I never see him again. Not because I hate him, because every time he appears, the hope comes back. That stupid, stubborn hope that this time he'll say times, "Thank you, Jay," asterisk. And when he doesn't, it's not just today's wound. It's every wound reopened in sequence all the way back to that subway platform. My daughter's name is Gloria. She's 3. She likes to help at the bakery by putting sprinkles on things that don't need sprinkles. Marcus lifts her onto the counter, and she waves at customers like she owns the place. She does, in a way. This whole thing, the shop, the life, the family, it grew from a push mower and a dropped-out girl and a mother who believed in doors worth knocking on. I built my door. I walked through it. I'm not waiting on the other side for anyone.
Story 5.
I know what you probably think of me. My husband's family certainly has their opinions. And I'm sure his friends have a few choice words for the woman who shattered the lives of 2 men who had known each other since they were teenagers. A monster. A snake. I've heard it all secondhand. And maybe they're right. But things are never as simple as they look from the outside. My husband, let's call him David, is a good man. If you were to write a list of everything a woman should want, he'd be it. He's handsome, has a great job, goes to the gym, and he never ever forgot a birthday or an anniversary. We were together for 7 years, married for almost 5. And in all that time, he never raised his voice. He helped with laundry, he made coffee for me every single morning, and when I talked about my stressful day at work, he would nod in all the right places and say all the right things. On paper, I was the luckiest woman in the world. I spent years telling myself that, forcing myself to believe it. But living inside that perfect picture was the loneliest I've ever been. Our marriage didn't feel like a partnership. It felt like a project. David's project. He was the manager and I was his star employee. Our house was his carefully curated display. Our relationship was his masterpiece. Every kind gesture felt rehearsed. Every I love you felt like a line from a script he'd memorized. He'd listen to me, but I could almost see the gears turning in his head, mentally ticking off a box times. Task 1, be an attentive husband. Complete. Asterisk. There was no real connection beneath the surface. It was all polite, calm, and completely empty. He loved the idea of me. A pretty, supportive wife who completed his perfect life. But he never seemed interested in the actual person, underneath the one who was messy and anxious and desperate to feel something real. He wanted to start a family. He brought it up more and more as my 30th birthday got closer. I always had an excuse. Let's wait until I get that promotion, or I just want one more year of it being just us. The truth. The thought of bringing a child into that quiet, pristine home terrified me. It felt like putting a fragile living thing inside a beautiful, sterile glass box. I felt like an actress who had been playing the same role for so long that she was starting to forget who she was when the curtains closed. I was suffocating in all that perfection. Then Mark's world fell apart. Mark was David's best friend. They'd been inseparable for 15 years since high school. He was a constant in our lives, the funny, easygoing third wheel to our perfect couple. When his long-term girlfriend left him, it wasn't just a breakup. It was a demolition. He was completely gutted. David's reaction was exactly what I expected, kind, logical, and distant. It's for the best, he told me calmly. He'll be fine. People mend in time. It was the perfect managed response. But I saw a man who was drowning and my husband was offering him a pamphlet on swimming lessons. I couldn't stand it. I texted Mark and asked if he wanted to get coffee. It wasn't a move. It wasn't a plan. I just wanted to sit with another human being who was feeling something raw and real. I wanted to offer a life raft. I never expected to find one for myself. Sitting across from him in that coffee shop was like a jolt of electricity. He wasn't performing. He was just broken. He talked about his ex, about his fears, about feeling like a failure. His voice cracked. He cried a little. It was ugly and messy, and the most honest thing I had witnessed in years. And for the first time, I wasn't a project to be managed. I was just a person sitting with another person sharing a real emotion. I went home that night and I was so angry at his ex for hurting him, but a part of me was angry for myself too. She had the guts to walk away from something that wasn't right for her. I was just sitting in my pretty cage, smiling and nodding. That coffee turned into another one. Then a long walk. We weren't sneaking around to have an affair, not at first. We were sneaking around to feel alive. We talked for hours about everything we were too scared to say to anyone else. My empty marriage, his broken heart, our disappointments, our dreams. We found a connection in the wreckage of our lives. It was wrong on so many levels, I know that. But falling in love with him was the first thing that had felt true in a very, very long time. We both knew it couldn't go on like that. The guilt was eating us alive. We loved David in our own ways. He was my husband, a good man who didn't deserve this. He was Mark's best friend, his brother. The thought of telling him felt like planning our own execution. We talked about it for weeks, trying to figure out the right way to do the worst thing imaginable. There wasn't one. In the end, we decided we had to do it together. It sounds awful, like a united front, a show of force. It was the opposite. It was a show of weakness. Neither of us was strong enough to face him alone. It was the most cowardly thing I've ever done, but we were terrified. We asked him to come over to Mark's house after work. He agreed easily, thinking it was just guys' night. I got there an hour early. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I sat on the edge of the couch, twisting my hands in my lap. Mark was pacing back and forth, unable to stand still. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. We barely spoke. There was nothing left to say. Then we heard it. The familiar rumble of David's truck pulling into the driveway. The sound of the engine cutting out. A car door slamming shut. Footsteps on the porch. My breath hitched. Mark stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes wide with sheer panic. The sound of the key sliding into the lock was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. The door swung open and there he was, David. He was smiling, holding a six-pack of beer. "Hey, I brought the good stuff," he said, his voice cheerful. Then his eyes landed on me, sitting on his best friend's couch. He looked from my face to Mark's. He saw the dread, the guilt, the absolute terror in our eyes. His smile vanished. The beer hung from his hand, forgotten. The cheerful energy in the room evaporated, replaced by a cold, heavy silence. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice suddenly quiet. "Why are you here?" The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. The question hung in the air between us, heavy and awful. David's eyes, which were usually so calm and steady, darted between me and Mark, trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. Mark looked like he was going to be sick. He opened his mouth, but only a choked sound came out. I knew it had to be me. I had to be the one to pull the trigger. "David," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again, forcing the words out. "Mark and I, we're in love." The words felt like poison on my tongue. I watched them hit him. He didn't shout. He didn't get angry. He just broke. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a quiet internal collapse. His whole body seemed to sag. The easy confidence he always wore vanished, replaced by a confusion so deep it looked like physical pain. The six-pack of beer slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. He didn't even seem to notice. He just stared at me. What he breathed. It wasn't a question demanding an answer. It was a sound of pure disbelief, as if I'd just told him the sky was green. "We fell in love," Mark finally managed to say, his voice raw. "I'm so sorry, man. I am so sorry." David's gaze shifted to Mark. For 15 years, that look had meant brotherhood, trust, a shared history. Now it was vacant. He was looking at a stranger. He didn't say anything else. He just shook his head slowly, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Then he turned around without picking up the beer and walked out the door, closing it softly behind him. We didn't move. We just stood there in the crushing silence, listening. We heard his truck door open and close, the engine turning over, the sound of the tires crunching on the gravel as he backed out of the driveway and drove away, and then he was gone. The aftermath was worse than the confrontation. The explosion had been quiet, but the fallout was everywhere. I went back to our house that night to pack a bag. David wasn't there. The silence in that home, which I had once found so suffocating, was now terrifying. Every object screamed at me. The coffee maker he used for me every morning. The framed photo of us on our wedding day, his perfect smile beaming out. Our house wasn't a home anymore. It was a museum of a life I had just destroyed. I grabbed some clothes, my toothbrush, and my laptop, and I fled. I moved in with Mark. There was nowhere else for me to go. It wasn't the triumphant start of a new life. It was two broken people clinging to each other in the wreckage they'd created. I spent days racked with a guilt so profound it made me physically ill. I texted David. "Are you okay? Please just let me know you're safe." They were genuine. As much as I couldn't be his wife anymore, a part of me still cared for the man I'd spent 7 years with. I didn't want him to be hurt. It was a stupid, selfish thought. Because I was the one holding the knife. His replies, when they came, were short and cold. "I'm fine. Leave me alone." The divorce papers arrived a few weeks later. It was all so clean and efficient, just like he was. No drama, just lawyers and logistics. The end of our marriage was just another project to be managed. We had to talk once on the phone about splitting our assets. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. He was the manager again, overseeing the dismantling of our life. And in that conversation, I did the last, and maybe the worst thing of all. "There's something else you should know," I said, my heart pounding. "Mark and I, we're trying for a baby." There was dead silence on the other end of the line. I know how it must have sounded. Cruel. Final twist of the knife. A way to prove how much happier I was. But it wasn't that. In my panicked, messed up head, it felt like honesty. It felt like the one thing I could do to be an adult in this unforgivable situation. He had wanted a family with me. He deserved to hear it from me, not through the grapevine 6 months from now when I started to show. He deserved to be prepared for what was coming, for what he might see on social media, for the final undeniable proof that our life together was over forever. It was a clumsy, awful attempt to manage the unmanageable. Final, misguided effort to be correct about something so deeply wrong. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then his voice, so quiet I could barely hear it, said, "Okay," and he hung up. That was the last time we ever spoke. I know I'm the villain in this story. I shattered a marriage and destroyed a friendship that was older than my entire relationship. I caused a good man an amount of pain I can't even comprehend. And I have to live with that. Some days the guilt is a physical weight that makes it hard to breathe. I see the look on his face in that doorway every time I close my eyes. That will never go away. But I am also alive for the first time in years. My life with Mark isn't perfect. It's messy. We argue. We have financial stress. We have days where the weight of what we did feels like it might crush us both. But we talk. We connect. We hold each other when things are raw and ugly. He sees times me, times the real me, not the idea of a perfect wife. I found the soul deep connection I was screaming for. It's beautiful and it's horrible and it's finally real. I escaped my gilded cage, but I had to burn it down to get out. And I'll carry the scars from that fire forever.
Story 6.
I know what you all think of me. I'm the liar, the gold digger, the woman who tried to cash in on a man who wasn't even dead. I've seen the comments. I've heard the whispers. But you don't know him. You don't know the man I met, or the man he became, or the monster he turned into. You only know the story he wanted you to hear. When I met him, he wasn't a man. He was a ghost. We were in the same church group, and while everyone else was trying to connect, he just sat there, taking up space. He was overweight, painfully shy, and his whole life was lived through a computer screen. His mother, with her iron-fisted faith, had suffocated him into a life of online games and quiet obedience. He was kind, I could see that. But he was weak. A gentle soul lost inside a life someone else had built for him. I wasn't exactly a prize myself. I had a 2-year-old son, and my husband, my legal husband anyway, was in prison. I was just trying to keep my head above water, trying to build something clean from a messy past. I saw the goodness buried in him, and I decided to dig it out. I was the one who coaxed him away from the computer. I took him on walks, taught him how to hold a conversation that wasn't about video games, how to look someone in the eye, taught him how to live. And he blossomed. He adored my son, treated him like his own flesh and blood. For the first time in my life, I felt safe. I thought, here it is. Here is a good man I can build a real family with. Then I got pregnant. My stomach dropped to the floor. It wasn't his. It was a mistake, a stupid, messy, loose end from a part of my life I was desperate to leave behind. My first thought was to tell him. But how could I? I looked at this man who had just learned to stand on his own 2 feet, who was finally happy, and I knew the truth would shatter him. It would send him right back into that dark, lonely shell, and he might never come out again. I would lose him, my son would lose the only real father he'd ever known, and this new baby would have nothing. So I made a choice. I chose our family. I told him the baby was his, and I saw the pure joy on his face. In that moment, I knew I'd done the right thing. Biology doesn't make a father. Love does. Showing up every single day does. And he was the best father I could have ever imagined. He was there for the birth, he changed diapers, he did late-night feedings. He loved that little boy with his whole heart. For 4 years we were happy. Genuinely happy. We even had twins. It was a shock, but our little house was filled with so much love and laughter, it felt like we could handle anything. He was a doting dad. He coached my oldest son's t-ball team. He built the most amazing pillow forts. He was the man I always knew he could be, and I was so proud of the life we had built. The biological details felt like a tiny, insignificant secret compared to the big, beautiful truth of our family. The beginning of the end started with a doctor's visit. He was going for a vasectomy consultation. He'd been talking about it since the twins were born, saying 3 kids was our perfect number. He went in for a simple appointment and came back a stranger. The light in his eyes, the warmth, it was just gone. He was quiet, cold. He started spending all his time on the computer again, just like when I first met him. He was retreating, and I couldn't reach him. I begged him to talk to me, but it was like talking to a brick wall. He started lying. Little things at first. His car broke down, so he had to stay the night at his mom's. He needed to work late, but I knew he'd been fired weeks ago. He was shutting me out piece by piece, and I was terrified. I was losing the man I had saved, watching him sink back into the ghost he used to be. Finally, he told me he needed to go away for a week. A hiking trip alone. He said he needed to clear his head to be in nature and just think. My heart broke, but I agreed. I prayed it would work. I prayed he'd come back to us, back to me. The morning he left, he hugged our oldest son so tightly, and I saw tears in his eyes. He just held him and cried. I thought he was crying because he was scared of losing the beautiful family we had built. I had no idea he was crying because he had already thrown it all away. A week went by. Then 10 days. No calls, no texts. I called the police. They found his car at the trailhead, but there was no sign of him. Search parties went out. Volunteers combed the woods. Every day was a new kind of agony, waiting for a call that I both dreaded and prayed for. The police finally told me to prepare for the worst, that he probably had an accident, a fall, that he was gone. My world ended. But the nightmare was just beginning. A few weeks later, I went to the grocery store and my debit card was declined. I tried a credit card. Declined. Confused and embarrassed, I left the card in the aisle and went straight to the bank. The teller looked at me with pity in her eyes. The joint savings account was empty. The checking account was empty. Every single credit card we shared was maxed out to the limit. It wasn't just a few $1,000s. It was everything. Over $100,000 gone. I felt the blood drain from my face. It all clicked into place in one horrible, sickening moment. The coldness, the lies, the hiking trip. He hadn't gotten lost. He hadn't fallen off a cliff. This was planned. He had systematically and deliberately drained every penny we had, leaving me and his 3 children with absolutely nothing. The man I loved hadn't just died. A monster had burned our whole world to the ground on his way out the door. The year that followed was hell on earth. I had 3 small children, no husband, and not a dime to my name. I had to go on Facebook, my cheeks burning with shame, and create a fundraiser just to buy diapers and formula. I swallowed my pride and begged friends from church for gas money and groceries. Every single day was a struggle to keep our heads above water, to shield the kids from how terrified I was. My oldest son kept asking when Daddy was coming home from his hike. What do you say to that? How do you explain a cruelty that you can't even understand yourself? Through it all, his mother was my rock. She was a saint. She knew her son, knew the lonely, fragile man he was before I came along. She saw the happy family we had built, and to her, that was all that mattered. The boys were her grandbabies, period. She helped as much as she could, but she didn't have much. The life insurance was our only hope. It felt like justice. It was the security he had promised his children, the future he had so carefully and methodically stolen from them. I paid every single premium that year with money I barely had. Each payment was a prayer and a promise I will not let you destroy them. The day of the hearing felt like the end of a long, dark tunnel. We weren't in a big courtroom, just a small, stuffy office with the insurance company's lawyers. His mom sat next to me holding my hand, her knuckles white. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This money would mean a safe place to live, food on the table, a chance for my boys to have a normal life again. Then there was a knock on the door. A man I didn't recognize walked in. He was thin, unnaturally so, with a thick, messy beard. It covered half his face. He was wearing dirty jeans and an old flannel shirt. He looked like someone who lived on the street. He looked at me, then at his mother, and his eyes were completely dead. Cold. Empty. Then he spoke, and the voice was his. A little rougher, but it was him. I believe you are trying to settle the issue of whether I am dead. The air went out of the room. I couldn't breathe. His mother made a small, strangled sound next to me. My brain just stopped working. It wasn't possible. This gaunt, bearded stranger couldn't be the man I had loved, the father of my children. But it was. He hadn't died on that mountain. He had been out there somewhere for a full year, watching us suffer, watching his own mother cry herself to sleep every night, watching his children wait for a ghost. He had let us go through a year of hell. He let me beg for money. He let his own mother grieve for a son who was perfectly alive. And he had only come back for this, to stop his children from getting the money they needed to survive. The shock was like being plunged into ice water, but what came next was pure fire. A white-hot rage that burned away everything else. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved. I was on my feet and across the small space between us before anyone could react. The sound of my hand cracking across his face echoed in the silent room. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, looking at me with that same dead-eyed expression, a small, smug smile playing on his lips. He looked like he had won. And hands were on me, pulling me back. A bailiff from the hallway had me by the arms, and another was clicking handcuffs around my wrists. I was sobbing now, screaming at him, asking him how he could do this to us, to his own family. And he just stood there. The victor. He had returned from the dead just to make sure his children got nothing. He didn't just cancel an insurance plan. He had come back to stand in the ashes of the world he'd burned down and watch us choke on the smoke. I was charged with assault. The story blew up, of course. The cheating fiancé and the man who faked his death, everyone took his side. They saw him as a victim who played the ultimate long con to get his revenge. They saw me as the gold-digging liar who got what she deserved. They don't get it. I lied. Yes. I made a choice a long time ago to protect a fragile man and build a family. My lie was meant to build something. To create love and stability where there was none. His lie was a weapon of mass destruction. He didn't just want to leave. He wanted to punish. He wanted to annihilate us. What kind of man lets his children believe he's dead? What kind of man drains their college funds and then shows up a year later to make sure they stay poor? That isn't a man. It's a monster. He thinks he won, that he taught me some great lesson. But all he did was prove what I saw in him from the very beginning, a weak, hollow person hiding behind a screen. He didn't come back stronger. He came back empty. He destroyed the only good thing in his life to prove a point, and now he has nothing but his victory. I have my boys. It's still hard. Every day is a fight. But I look at them and I know why I did what I did. I chose them then and I choose them now. He can have his money and his story. He can be the hero of his own tragedy. I'll be the one raising the sons he threw away. And I'll make sure they grow up to be better men than he ever was.
Story 7.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure my ex-husband Mark has already told his side of the story. I'm sure he made me sound like a crazy, jealous ex-wife who can't stand that he's moved on. I can just hear him now telling everyone how I showed up screaming and ruined his day. And yeah, I did scream. I'm not proud of it. But if you knew the whole story, you might understand why. This isn't about jealousy. This has nothing to do with me wanting him back. This is about our kids. It has always been about our kids. When Mark and I divorced 2 years ago, it was messy. And it hurt like all divorces do. But we made one single unbreakable promise to each other. We promised that our sons Leo, who's 7, and Ben, who's 5, would be our priority. Their world had just been split in half, and it was our job to make both halves feel safe and stable. We agreed on everything. We would communicate. No big decisions without talking first. No new schools, no moving out of state, and definitely no major life changes without a heads up for the kids. It was our mantra. For the kids. And for 2 years, it actually worked. I was proud of us. We weren't friends, not really, but we were a solid parenting team. We'd text about doctor's appointments and parent-teacher conferences. He'd call me if Ben had a nightmare about monsters. I'd call him when Leo scored his first goal in soccer. We were building a new kind of family, one that could withstand the divorce. I let my guard down. I started to believe that despite everything we've been through, we had found a way to make it work. I trusted him. That was my biggest mistake. I trusted that his definition of a major life change was the same as mine. The morning it all fell apart started like any other frantic weekday. I was juggling breakfast for the boys and trying to find a matching pair of tiny socks when my phone rang. It was my boss. There was a huge problem at work. A server had crashed and they needed me in the office right now, not in 3 hours when my shift was supposed to start. My heart immediately started pounding. My first thought wasn't about work. It was about the kids. My mom was out of town and my usual backup sitter was unavailable. The only person who could take them was Mark. It was his weekend with them anyway. I just needed to drop them off a few hours early. It shouldn't have been a big deal. I started calling him the second I hung up with my boss. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. Okay, maybe he's in the shower. I sent a text. Hey, have a big emergency at work. Need to drop the boys off now instead of later. Please call me back as soon as possible. I waited a minute trying to get the kids into their jackets while staring at my phone. No reply. The little delivered notification just sat there mocking me. I sent another text. Mark, I'm serious. I have to go. I'm leaving now. I'll be there in 20. Please just let me know you got this. Nothing. The silence was infuriating. My anxiety started to bubble up into real anger. We have 2 young children. What if this was a real emergency? What if one of the kids was sick or had gotten hurt? Being a parent means being available. You don't just get to turn your phone off and ignore the world, not when you're someone's dad. My hands were shaking a little as I buckled the boys into their car seats. I tried to plaster a smile on my face for them, telling them they were going to have a surprise morning with Daddy, but inside, I was already rehearsing the angry lecture I was going to give him. When I pulled onto his street, I felt a small wave of relief wash over me. His car was in the driveway. He was home. He was safe. The relief was immediately replaced by a fresh surge of anger. He was home and he was ignoring my calls. I got Leo and Ben out of the car, grabbing their little backpacks, and walked them up to the front door, my stomach in knots. I rang the bell, ready to lay into him the second he opened it. But he wasn't the one who opened the door. It was a woman. A total stranger. She had wet hair like she'd just gotten out of the shower, and she was wearing nothing but a white bath towel that she was clutching tightly to her chest. She looked young, and she looked just as stunned to see me and my 2 little boys standing on the welcome mat as I was to see her. My brain just stopped. It couldn't process it. This was the house my sons called their second home. This was the door they burst through every other Friday yelling for their dad. And standing in that doorway was a half-naked stranger. For a split second, I couldn't even speak. All the anger about the unanswered phone calls vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp, gut-wrenching fear. It wasn't that he was with someone. I'm not an idiot. I knew he'd date again. I had even gone on a few dates myself. But this was different. This wasn't just a date. The towel, the wet hair, the fact she was answering his door in the middle of the morning. This was serious. This was a relationship. He had a girlfriend. A live-in or at least sleepover girlfriend that he had never not once mentioned to me. Every single promise we made about communication, about stability, about putting the boys first, it all just shattered in that one moment. My mind was racing. How long had this been going on? Had my sons met her? Do they sleep here when she's here? Who is she? My kids were about to walk into this house, and I had no idea who they would be sharing it with. He didn't give me a heads up. He didn't give me a courtesy call. He didn't do anything a co-parent is supposed to do. He built a secret life and let me, the mother of his children, walk right into it completely blind. The woman mumbled something like, I'll get him," and disappeared back inside, leaving the door ajar. A moment later, Mark appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. He was wearing pajama pants and an old t-shirt, and he looked annoyed. Not worried, not apologetic. Annoyed. As if I was the one who had done something wrong. "What are you doing here?" he said, his voice thick with sleep. "You're hours early." Early. The word came out like a croak. I stared at him at the sleep, still in his eyes at the absolute lack of concern on his face. "Mark! I've been calling you. I've been texting you. My boss called me in. There's an emergency." "Where have you been?" He had the nerve to look irritated. My phone was on silent. I was sleeping. "Sleeping," I repeated, my voice getting dangerously quiet. The boys were still standing right behind me, their little hands clutching my jeans. I couldn't have this fight in front of them. I forced a smile that felt like broken glass. "Boys, go put your bags in your room. Daddy and I just need to talk for a minute." Leo, always so perceptive, looked from my face to Mark's. "Are you mad, Mommy?" I knelt down, my heart breaking. "No, sweetie. Not at all. I just have to get to work really fast. Go on, I'll come say a proper goodbye." They ran past him into the house, and the second I heard the door to their room click shut, the dam broke. My voice was a furious whisper. "Who was that, Mark? Who the hell was that woman answering the door to the house our children live in?" He crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. It was his classic defensive pose, and it sent a fresh wave of rage through me. "Her name is Sarah, and she has nothing to do with this. This is about you showing up unannounced." "Unannounced? I called you 6 times. What if one of the boys was hurt? What if I was in a car accident? Your phone being on silent isn't an excuse. It's negligence. You're a father." "Stop being so dramatic," he shot back, his voice rising. I was going to call you back. And my relationship is my business. It has nothing to do with you. That was it. That was the line. The one that told me he didn't understand a single thing. It has everything to do with me, you idiot. It has to do with me because it has to do with them. I pointed towards the boys' room. You don't get to have a separate life. When that life involves a stranger walking around half naked where our kids are about to eat their breakfast. We had an agreement. We promised we would communicate about this stuff. Communicating about parent-teacher conferences is one thing, he sneered. You don't get a say in who I date. Are you jealous? Is that what this is? You can't stand that I'm happy. I actually laughed a sharp, ugly sound. Jealous, Mark. I could not care less who you date. I'm happy you've moved on. But I need to know who is around my children. How long has this been going on? How long have you been hiding her from me? He looked away. And in that moment I knew it wasn't new. This wasn't a one-night stand. This was a whole secret. A few months, he mumbled. How many months? I pressed, stepping closer. He finally looked at me, his eyes full of defiance. 4 months. Okay, we've been dating for 4 months. I was going to tell you. 4 months. 120 days. A third of a year. He had been building a new life, a serious relationship, and he had looked me in the eye every other weekend during drop-offs and pickups and said nothing. He had let this woman into the space where our sons sleep, and he never once thought that the mother of those boys deserved to know. He didn't see me as a partner anymore. He saw me as an obstacle. The person he had to hide things from. You are the most selfish person I have ever known, I said, my voice shaking with a fury that was so deep it scared me. You stand there and you talk about your privacy, but you completely disregard their stability. You had 4 months to prepare me. You had 4 months to have an adult conversation. Instead, you let me find out like this on the doorstep with our sons standing right behind me. You didn't do that to protect them. You did it because you're a coward. The fight ended like all our fights used to, with him shutting down and me being left with the emotional wreckage. He just stood there, shaking his head, muttering about how I was blowing things out of proportion. There was no apology. No understanding. Just a wall. I had to leave. I had to go to work. I walked past him into the house. The woman, Sarah, was now in the kitchen, dressed in jeans and a sweater, looking mortified. She wouldn't meet my eye. I went to the boys' room and gave them both the biggest hugs I could manage, my throat tight. I told them I loved them more than anything, that I'd see them on Sunday, and that they should be good for Daddy. Leaving them there in that house that suddenly felt alien and unsafe was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. The entire day at work was a wash. I sat at my desk staring at a spreadsheet, but all I could see was that woman's face, the shock in her eyes. I saw the annoyance in Mark's. I replayed our conversation over and over, feeling that unique brand of crazy that comes when someone makes you feel like your completely valid fears are irrational. Late that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. Asterisk. You really overreacted this morning. You made Sarah incredibly uncomfortable. I was going to introduce you all soon when the time was right. You ruined that. Asterisk. I read the text 3 times. He still didn't get it. He thought my concern was a social misstep, a breach of etiquette. He didn't understand that my world had fundamentally shifted that morning. The foundation I had so carefully helped build for our children, the one based on trust and open communication, had been bulldozed. And he was the one driving the machine. This isn't about him being happy. I hope he is. But his happiness can't come at the expense of our children's stability. The trust is gone now. Completely. When I look at him, I don't see my co-parent anymore. I see a man who keeps secrets. I see a man whose priorities have shifted so far from his children that he can't even recognize a legitimate danger to their emotional well-being. The team is broken. The promise is a lie. And now I have to figure out how to protect my sons from the fallout. All by myself.
Story 8.
I'm sure you've already heard Emily's version of the story. I'm the villain, the monster who blew up our lives and our friend group. And I get it. From the outside, that's exactly what it looks like. Honestly, a big part of me knows that's what I am. But it's never that simple, is it? Things don't just go from perfect to a dumpster fire overnight. It's a slow burn, a quiet rotting from the inside out, that nobody else sees until the whole thing collapses. Our relationship, Emily's and mine, died long before that cabin trip. It died on 1,000 Tuesday nights spent on the same couch staring at different screens. The only sound the fake laughter from some show she was watching. It died in the mornings when we'd move around each other in the kitchen like polite ghosts getting our coffee without making eye contact. We were a habit. We were comfortable, predictable, and profoundly, soul-crushingly lonely even when we were in the same room. I'd try to start a conversation about my day, about something I was excited about at work, and I could see her eyes glaze over. She'd nod, say, "That's nice, honey," but she wasn't there. She wasn't listening. I felt like a boring story she'd heard too many times. And the intimacy? That was the first thing to go. It wasn't just about sex. It was about touching, holding hands, a random hug in the kitchen. It all evaporated. It got to the point where I felt like I was inconveniencing her by existing in her space. I loved her, or at least I loved the memory of what we used to be. But the woman I was living with felt like a stranger, and I'm sure she felt the same way about me. I was just a piece of furniture in the apartment we shared. Then Kara happened. I know how that sounds. Then another woman happened. The classic scumbag excuse. But it wasn't like I was looking for it. It started so small I didn't even notice it. We were all out for dinner, the whole group. And I told some stupid, nerdy joke about a project I was working on. It fell completely flat. Silence. Emily was scrolling through her phone. But across the table, Kara was actually laughing. Not a polite titter, but a real, genuine laugh. She looked right at me and said, "That's actually hilarious." Explain the technical part again. And I did. And she listened. She asked questions. Her eyes didn't glaze over. For the first time in what felt like years, someone saw me. Not Paul, Emily's boyfriend. Just Paul. That was the spark. It turned into little conversations, texting about a show we were both watching, grabbing coffee when we were in the same part of town for work. It was all innocent, I swear. We were just friends, but with her I felt witty and interesting. I felt alive. With Emily, I felt like a chore. The affair started about 3 months before the trip. We were at a party and Emily left early, complaining of a headache. Kara and I ended up on the back porch talking for hours. Her relationship with Tyler was a lot like mine, with Emily comfortable, safe, but passionless. We talked about feeling invisible, and it was like looking in a mirror. One of us leaned in. I don't even remember who. It was a stupid, drunken mistake that felt more real than anything in my life. We hated ourselves for it. We knew we were playing with a bomb that would destroy everything: our relationships, our friendships. Tyler is one of my best friends. Emily was the love of my life. This group of 11 people was our whole world. We tried to stop. We'd go a week without talking, but then one of us would crack, sending a simple "you up" text. And the desperate need to feel seen would win out over the guilt. We were drowning, and we were each other's only life raft. We were stupid enough to think we could keep our heads above water without anyone noticing. The cabin trip was a nightmare from the moment we packed the car. All 11 of us crammed into Kenny's beautiful remote cabin. It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway. For me, it was 2 days of sustained high-level anxiety. I was a performer on a stage, playing the part of the happy, attentive boyfriend to Emily. Every time I smiled at her, it felt like my face was cracking. Every time I laughed at a group joke, it felt hollow. And Kara was right there. I could feel her presence in the room even when my back was turned. We'd catch each other's eye for a fraction of a second, and in that tiny moment, a whole conversation would happen, one filled with guilt, desire, and terror. I'd watch her interact with Tyler, holding his hand, laughing at his jokes, and my stomach would twist into a knot. She was a better actor than I was. By the second day, the pressure was unbearable. I felt like I was going to explode. The constant chatter, the forced fun, the proximity to everyone, it was suffocating. When the idea of going out for a big group lunch in town came up, it was like a divine intervention. A chance to breathe. I saw my opening. "You know what, guys? I think I'm gonna sit this one out," I said, putting on my best tired voice. I barely slept last night, just feeling wiped. A few feet away, sitting on the arm of the sofa, Kara chimed in almost immediately. "My head is pounding, actually. I think the altitude is getting to me. I'd probably just make everyone miserable if I came." It wasn't planned. Not really. We hadn't spoken a word about it. But we didn't have to. It was a shared, desperate thought that we both seized at the same time. Emily came over and felt my forehead. "You don't feel warm," she said, more of an observation than a concern. "I'm just exhausted," I told her. "I'm just going to crash on the couch for a bit. You guys have fun." Tyler gave Kara a kiss on the forehead. told her to feel better, and soon they were all piling into 3 cars. We stood at the door, waving them off like the responsible sick ones staying behind. The moment the last car disappeared down the long gravel driveway, the silence that fell over the cabin was deafening. We both stood there for a long moment, not looking at each other, the unspoken thing hanging in the air between us. The performance was over. We were alone. I turned from the door and Kara was still standing there, arms wrapped around herself. We didn't say a word. We didn't need to. The lie we'd both just told hung between us thick and heavy. All the stolen glances, the secret texts, the months of guilt and fear and desperation, it all came to a head in that silent room. I looked at her, and she was the only thing that made sense in a life that had stopped making sense a long time ago. I don't know who moved first. It doesn't matter. It wasn't romantic or sweet. It was desperate. It was 2 people grabbing onto the only real thing they had, even if that thing was a stick of dynamite with a lit fuse. We were so wrapped up in that moment and finally not having to hide that the world just disappeared. There were no friends, no consequences, no Emily, no Tyler. There was just us in the quiet of the cabin. We never heard the car pull up. We never heard the key in the lock. The first thing that broke through the bubble was Ethan's voice, sharp as a shard of glass. What the hell? My blood went ice cold. We scrambled apart, pulling at clothes, a pathetic, frantic mess of shame. And there was Ethan standing in the doorway, his face a mask of disbelief that was quickly hardening into pure disgust. The bubble didn't just pop. It exploded. Before I could even get a word out, I could hear more voices outside, the sound of car doors. They were all back. The lunch must have been cut short. Chaos. That's the only word for it. Ethan was screaming now, raw, guttural yells of, "Are you kidding me?" and calling us every name in the book. He was blocking the doorway as the others started to filter in behind him, drawn by the noise. I saw their faces change. In slow motion, confusion, then dawning comprehension, then horror. I looked for Emily. She was standing behind everyone, her face completely white like she couldn't process what she was seeing. Then Tyler pushed his way to the front. He looked at Kara, who was sobbing now, trying to pull a blanket around herself. He looked at me, half-dressed and frozen. I saw the exact moment his heart broke. His face just crumpled. It was only for a second. Then it was replaced by a kind of rage I have never seen in another human being. "Paul," he whispered, but it sounded like an accusation. "My Paul." He came at me. It wasn't a calculated punch. It was a blind lunge, fueled by pure betrayal. I was his best friend. We'd known each other since college. And I had just ripped his world apart. Instinct took over. I shoved him back hard. He stumbled into a table. Ethan, seeing his friend go down, jumped on me. It was no longer a confrontation. It was a disgusting, clumsy brawl. We crashed into the furniture, a tangle of limbs and grunts and curses. I wasn't even fighting back, really. I was just trying to not get my head smashed into the floor. I could hear girls screaming, telling them to stop. Through the blur, I saw Kenny, good solid Kenny, the owner of the cabin, trying to get between us, trying to pull Ethan off me. "Guys, stop it! Just stop!" he yelled. In the mess of it all, my elbow swung back blindly and caught him square in the mouth. He staggered back, hand flying to his face. I saw the dark gash on his lip, the bright red blood welling up. My stomach bottomed out. I had just hurt the one guy who was trying to be a peacemaker. The fight just died then, the energy sucked out of the room by that one moment of stupid collateral damage. We all just stood there breathing heavily in the wreckage of the living room. That's when the questions started, a firing squad of words. Tyler, his voice shaking with rage, was staring at Kara. "How long?" Kara was crying too hard to speak. I knew I had to say it. The lies had to end. 3 months, I said, my voice hoarse. A little over 3 months. If I had dropped a bomb in the middle of the room, the effect would have been the same. A few people gasped. I saw Emily flinch like I'd physically slapped her. 3 months! This wasn't a one-time drunken mistake at the cabin. This was a calculated long-term betrayal. It was a secret life we had been living right under their noses. The silence that followed was worse than the screaming. It was thick with judgment. I looked around the room at the people who had been my family, my friends. I saw pity, I saw anger, but mostly, I saw disgust. I finally looked at Emily. She wasn't crying. Her face was just empty. She looked straight through me as if I wasn't even there. That was so much worse than hatred. I had made myself invisible to her in a whole new way. Kenny, holding a dish towel to his bleeding lip, was the one to finally break the silence. His voice was low and steady. "I think you two need to leave. Now." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a banishment. No one argued. Kara and I, without looking at each other, walked past our friends, our former friends, to the bedrooms where our bags were. The shame was a physical weight. I could feel 10 pairs of eyes on my back as I packed my things, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip the bag. When I walked back out, Kara was already at the door with her stuff. We didn't exchange a word. What was there to say? We weren't a team escaping to start a new life. We were two separate criminals being exiled from the only home we'd ever known. I walked out the door and didn't look back. The drive home was 4 hours of absolute hell. My phone was blowing up, but I didn't look at it. I knew what the messages would say. I drove in total silence, replaying the scene over and over in my head. The look on Tyler's face. The blood on Kenny's lip. The complete, utter emptiness in Emily's eyes. I got back to the apartment we shared. It was quiet and dark. Her car wasn't there. I walked through the rooms that held 5 years of our life together. Photos of us on the fridge, her favorite blanket on the couch, the stupid mug I bought her that she used every morning. Every object was a monument to my failure. I knew I couldn't be there when she got back. I couldn't make her face me again. So I packed another bag, a bigger one this time with everything I could fit. I wrote her a note, but I threw it away. The words were useless. Nothing I could write would ever be enough. Before I walked out of that apartment for the last time, I sent her a text. I'm so sorry, Em. I'll be gone when you get home. All the stuff is yours. I turned off my phone and left. I didn't do it to hurt her. I did it because I was a coward who was desperate to feel alive. And in the process, I had destroyed the lives of everyone I cared about, including my own. I got my spark, and it burned everything to the ground. Now I'm just sitting in the ashes alone.
Story 9.
I know what you think of me. You've probably heard my husband's version of the story. I'm the cheater, the liar, the woman who had everything and threw it all away. And you're not wrong. I did those things. But you're not right either. You see the monster, but you don't see the cage she was kept in. We were the storybook couple. High school sweethearts. He was the ambitious one. I was the supportive one. We got married young, had kids young, and he climbed. God, did he climb. He worked his way right into the top 1%. We have a house that magazines photograph cars that cost more than my parents' first home. And our kids are in the best schools money can buy. He gave us a life without a single financial worry. I managed that life. I was the chief operating officer of our family. I handled the schedules, the maintenance, the school meetings, the meal plans, the social calendar. I made sure his perfect world ran without a single problem so he could focus on making the money that paid for it. He would come home late, exhausted from a long day of being important, and I'd have everything ready. The kids would be fed, and finishing homework, the house would be spotless, and a smile would be on my face. He'd kiss my cheek, ask if there were any fires to put out, and then retreat to his office or turn on the TV. He stopped seeing me. I wasn't a person, his partner, his wife. I was a high-level employee. He didn't ask how my day was. He asked if the plumber fixed the leak. He didn't ask what I was thinking about. He asked if I'd remembered to RSVP to his company's holiday party. The loneliness started as a quiet hum in the background of my days. Then it grew until it was a physical ache in my chest. You can be surrounded by people, by your own children, in a huge, beautiful house, and feel completely and totally alone. I started searching online, not for an affair, I swear. I was just looking for a conversation. I found a website for people seeking platonic friends. I just wanted to talk to someone who didn't need me to fix something. I wanted someone to ask me a question about myself and actually want to hear the answer. That's how I met the first man. The one from the phone bill. We started talking, and it was like a switch flipped on inside me. A part of me I thought was dead came back to life. My phone would buzz in the middle of a grocery run. And for a second, I wasn't just a mom in a minivan with a list of chores. I was funny. I was smart. Someone thought I was interesting. He saw the girl my husband had married, not the household manager I had become. The texting became my secret. It was a year and a half of late nights after my husband was asleep, and the house was finally silent. My phone screen would light up the dark bedroom, and in that little bubble of light, I was my own person. It was my escape. Of course, I hid it. It was the only thing in my life that was truly mine. It wasn't about sex, not with him. It was about connection. The lies I told by omission weren't about hurting my husband. They were about protecting the one thing that was keeping me from going crazy. I deleted the threads every morning. It was a habit like deleting your browser history. A way to keep my world separate from his? I knew I was playing with fire, but feeling seen was a drug. And like any drug, it made me reckless. I needed more. The validation was addictive. I started looking for more of it in uglier, more desperate ways. The Craigslist meetups. They were shameful. They weren't about love or even real desire. They were a pathetic test. Could I still make a man look at me with hunger? Could a stranger see me as a woman, not just a wife and a mother? I got my answer. And each time I felt emptier than before. The trip to Alaska was supposed to be for me, a chance to clear my head and find myself again. Instead, I just found another man and another way to prove how lost I was. Each betrayal was just a symptom of the same sickness I was dying to be seen. The end began on a Tuesday morning. I came downstairs to get the kids ready for school, and I saw it sitting on the printer. The phone bill. My husband always had them emailed, but for some reason this one had been printed. It wasn't a single page. It was a stack. I saw the number on the front. 42 pages. My blood went ice cold. 42 pages of my secret life logged and itemized in neat little columns. A year and a half of late-night texts, all reduced to a single phone number, repeated over and over and over. He didn't say anything all day. That was worse than yelling. The silence was heavy, suffocating. He came home that night and sat me down at the kitchen table, the stack of papers between us like a wall. "Who is this?" he asked. His voice was flat. No anger, no sadness. Just a CEO identifying a problem. My first instinct was to protect him, to protect us. To make it small. "He's just a friend," I said, my voice shaking. "We talk sometimes." He just stared at me. He tapped the top page with his finger. 4,712 times last month. You talk sometimes. At 2 in the morning. The dam I had built around my secret life began to crack. He was a man who dealt in facts and figures, and I had handed him the evidence to convict me. The trickle truth began. It wasn't a calculated plan to deceive him more. It was me panicking, trying to plug the holes as they appeared. Okay, we talk a lot. He was going through a hard time. I was just being a friend. Each lie was weaker than the last. He kept asking questions, calm and logical, and each answer I gave just made me sound more guilty. He knew I was lying. He just didn't know the scale of it yet. I finally admitted. It was emotional that I had developed feelings, but I swore on our children's lives that I had never, ever met him in person. He listened to all of it, his face unreadable. Then he stood up. "You deleted the messages from your phone, didn't you?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "I thought so," he said, and walked out of the room. He came back a minute later holding my phone and his laptop. He didn't look at me. He just started connecting cables. "There's a problem in my organization," he said, his voice as cold as a boardroom. and I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I watched him open a program on his computer. Data recovery software. He was going to pull every deleted message, every picture, every secret I had out of the digital graveyard where I had buried them. It wasn't a husband trying to understand his wife's pain. It was a forensic investigation. "Don't," I whispered. "Please don't do this." He didn't even look up. The truth is in there. I'm going to find it. Just let it go, please. Can't we just get over this? I was begging now, tears streaming down my face. My whole secret world, my shame, my desperate and ugly acts, it was all in there. He was about to see all of me, and I knew it would destroy us. He just clicked the mouse. Recovering files, the screen read, "Please wait." The two words just hung there on the screen. Please wait. It felt like an eternity. Every tick of the clock on the wall sounded like a hammer blow. I wanted to scream, to grab the laptop and smash it against the wall, to do anything to stop that little green bar from crawling across the screen. But I was frozen. He sat there perfectly still, his eyes locked on the monitor. He wasn't my husband anymore. He was an auditor, a forensic investigator waiting for a report to run on his company's biggest liability. Me. My pleading had turned into a desperate, panicked sort of rage. "This is insane! You're treating me like a criminal! I am your wife!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "Get over it! It was just texting! Just let it go!" He didn't flinch. He just looked at me, and his voice was so quiet it was scarier than any shout. If it was just texting, you wouldn't be this terrified. He was right. And that made me hate him in that moment. He was always right. Always logical. Always in control. The progress bar hit 100%. The screen refreshed, filled with folders and files with long, complicated names. He clicked one. A wall of text appeared. My texts, my words. My secret life resurrected and laid out on a 14-inch screen. He didn't say anything for a long time, just scrolled with the trackpad. Scroll, stop. Scroll, stop. The silence was the worst part. I could feel my own heartbeat in my ears. Then he cleared his throat. "You wrote here, 'Can't wait to see you again.' I thought you said you never met him." He turned the laptop so I could see my own words staring back at me. The dam didn't just break. It evaporated. The trickle truth was over. The flood was here. "It wasn't him," I stammered. "That wasn't to the man from the phone bill." His eyes narrowed. "Then who was it to?" And so it came out. The ugly, shameful truth about Craigslist. I told him about meeting a man for a coffee, just to see if I could. Then I admitted it was two men. I left out the details, painting it as a sad, pathetic cry for attention, which it was. I was trying to make him see the Times Y asterisk. I was trying to show him the lonely woman in the gilded cage, so desperate for a crumb of validation, she went looking for it in the darkest corners of the internet. He wasn't listening to the why. He was just processing the what. He kept scrolling, his face a mask of stone. So you met them for coffee? That's it, he asked, his tone demanding a simple yes or no. My whole body was shaking. I knew this was it. The last lie I could possibly tell. And I couldn't do it. The exhaustion of it all was too much. I just wanted it to be over. No, I whispered. My voice was so small I could barely hear it myself. I slept with one of them. He stopped scrolling. He didn't look at me. He just stared at the screen. I saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the edge of the laptop. For the first time all night, the problem solver disappeared, and I saw a flash of the man I had married. I saw the raw, gaping wound I had just inflicted. It was only there for a second, a flicker of pure pain in his eyes, and then the mask was back. Was that the only one? He asked. The question was methodical. He was collecting the last pieces of data. I thought of my trip to Alaska. The trip I'd told him was to find myself. The pathetic irony was crushing. No, I said, the word tasting like poison. On my trip to Alaska, there was someone else. That was it. All the cards were on the table. The whole disgusting, broken story was out. I braced myself for the explosion, for the screaming, the accusations, the end of the world. But it never came. I closed the laptop. The click was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. He leaned back in his chair and let out a long, slow breath. He actually looked relieved. Okay, he said, nodding to himself. Okay. He finally looked at me, and there was no anger. There was no pain. There was just clarity. The weight, he said. It's gone. For months I've known something was wrong. I've been walking around with this knot in my gut, trying to figure out the problem, trying to solve it. Now I know. The doubt is gone. And in that one moment I understood everything. He wasn't mourning the loss of our love or our marriage. He was relieved that the mystery that had been disrupting his orderly life was finally solved. The data was all in. The problem had been identified. It was me. The days that followed were cold and quiet. We were business partners negotiating the dissolution of a company. He was efficient, organized. We talked about lawyers, about custody arrangements for the kids, about splitting assets. He never raised his voice. He never cried. He never asked me why one more time. To him, the why was irrelevant. The data was conclusive. I was a faulty component, and he was simply removing me from the system so it could run properly again. The dream house is his now. I live in a small apartment across town. It's quiet here. The loneliness I was trying to escape from in that big empty house is nothing compared to the loneliness I feel now. Before I was invisible in a life full of people. Now I am completely, utterly alone, and everyone sees me for exactly what I am. He thinks he knows the whole story because he recovered the texts, but he never understood the truth. He solved the what, but he never looked for the why. He found the proof of the affair, but he never saw the years of quiet desperation that led to it. He won. He got his answer, his clean slate. The weight is off his shoulders. And now all of it is on mine. And it is so much heavier than I ever could have imagined. I finally got what I wanted. I'm no longer just a role. I'm no longer invisible. He sees me now. Everyone does. They see a woman who destroyed a perfect life. A woman who torched her own family. They see a monster. And maybe they're right. Maybe that's all I ever was. A monster who was just too cowardly to scream that she was lonely.
Story teen.
I need to get this out. Because right now, in my kids' eyes, I'm the monster. I'm the villain who blew up their perfect little family. But the truth is that family was a hollowed-out building waiting for a strong wind. It was broken long before I did anything. The life you think we had was just a performance, and I couldn't play my part anymore. For 15 years, I wasn't married to a woman. I was married to a title, Dr. Sarah. It wasn't just her job. It was her entire identity. Everything revolved around her schedule, her stress, her heroic work. And don't get me wrong, I was proud of her. I still am. She saves lives. But at home, she was a ghost. Our house wasn't a home. It was a recovery station for a doctor. It was quiet, clean, and completely sterile. Life ran on a schedule dictated by the hospital. Dinner at 6:30. Kids' homework, checked by 7. 1:05. Lights out by 1. 0. 0. 0. So she could be rested for her rounds. I was a function, not a husband. I was the guy who drove the kids to soccer practice, the guy who made sure the bills were paid, the guy who fixed the leaky faucet. I handled the logistics of life so she could handle the logistics of death. I'd try to talk to her at night, try to connect. I'd say, "How was your day?" And I'd get a clinical rundown of procedures and patient statuses. I'd try to talk about us, about how I felt we were drifting apart, and she'd look at me with this exhausted expression and say, "I just spent 12 hours on my feet. Can we not do this right now?" Right now became never. There was no passion, no intimacy, no spontaneity. We were roommates who shared children and a mortgage. I was so profoundly lonely. I'd sit in the living room at night after everyone was asleep in this big silent house and feel like I was completely invisible. I was starving for someone to just see times me asterisk. Not the dad, not the husband, not the household manager. Just me. Then I met Anna at work. It wasn't some grand dramatic thing. It started with a joke over the coffee machine. Then we started eating lunch together. We talked about everything and nothing, stupid movies, books, what we wanted to do before we got old. It felt so easy. She would ask me about my day and actually listen to the answer. She'd laugh at my dumb stories. She saw me. For the first time in more than a decade, I felt like a real person again. I felt interesting. I felt alive. the messages my daughter found. I know how they look. I know they seem sordid and secretive, but they weren't. They were my lifeline. They were notes from another human being who reminded me that I wasn't just a machine. We'd text all day. "How's your morning? Thinking of you." Little things that meant the world. It was a friendship that slowly, inevitably, became something more. Because how could it not? I was dying of thirst in a desert, and she offered me a glass of water. Then the pandemic hit. The world shut down and my house became a pressure cooker. My wife, the doctor, was now a frontline hero. The fear in our home was a physical thing. She'd come home, strip off her clothes in the garage, and go through this decontamination ritual before she'd even speak to us. The conversation was always about case numbers, ventilator, shortages, and death. My mom was living with us then, and she was high risk, so the tension was unbearable. We were all trapped walking on eggshells. I was going out of my mind. My wife's entire focus was on the hospital, which I understood, but I was drowning in the anxiety she brought home every single night. Seeing Anna during that time wasn't a betrayal of quarantine. It was an act of survival. It was the only hour of my week where I could breathe. We'd meet in a park, sit 6 feet apart on a bench, and just talk. It was the only thing keeping my sanity intact. Was it a risk? Yes. But staying in that house, suffocating in that sterile fear, felt like a much bigger risk to my soul. Of course, it didn't stay on a park bench. We fell in love. A real messy, complicated love. And with that love came hope. The idea that maybe I didn't have to live out the rest of my days as a ghost in my own life. Anna was also in a dead marriage, and we found a future in each other. A few months ago, she told me she was pregnant. It wasn't an oops. It wasn't some trap. It felt like a sign. A chance to start over, to build a family based on actual love and partnership, not just shared history and obligations. It was my chance to finally actually be happy. And I just knew that it meant I had to end the performance at home. I started planning how I would tell everyone, how I could do it gently. I knew it would be awful, but it had to be done. We were all living a lie. I remember the day it all fell apart. I had just come back from seeing Anna. We had been talking about baby names. I walked into the house feeling lighter. Guilty, yes, but also filled with a strange, terrifying hope. For a split second, I actually believed that maybe this could all work out somehow. I put my phone on the kitchen counter to charge and went to go check on my mom. I was gone for maybe 10 minutes. When I walked back into the kitchen, my daughter Maya was standing there. She wasn't looking at me. She was just staring at my phone, which I'd stupidly left unlocked on the counter. Her face was pale. She looked up at me, and her eyes were filled with a kind of cold knowledge that I had never seen in a child before. And in her hand, she was holding my phone. She just held it up the screen, glowing with the last message I'd sent to Anna. I love you. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. The world just went silent. For a second, all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator. My heart was pounding in my ears. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. What could I say? It's not what it looks like. It was exactly what it looked like. Dad, Maya's voice was barely a whisper. She finally looked at me, and her eyes, they weren't just angry. They were broken. It was like she was looking at a complete stranger. Who is Anna? I tried to take a step toward her, to reach for her, but she flinched back. That small movement hurt more than a slap in the face. Maya, honey, it's complicated. We need to talk. Complicated? Her voice got a little stronger. It looks pretty simple to me. You're cheating on Mom. Her younger brother Liam must have heard us, because he appeared in the doorway. He looked from Maya's face to mine, and he knew instantly. He didn't have to see the phone. He just knew. I spent the next hour trying to explain the unexplainable to two teenagers. How can you describe 15 years of slow-burning loneliness to kids who have only known this one life? I tried to tell them how their mother and I had grown apart, how we were more like business partners than a married couple. I told them I was unhappy. I tried to make them see me not as their perfect, invincible dad, but as a human being who was just trying to find some happiness. They didn't hear it. All they heard was a confession of betrayal. Maya looked at me with her mother's clinical, judgmental stare. Mom is working day and night, risking her life to save people, and you're doing this while Grandma is sick right here in our house. That was the nail in the coffin. They saw their mother as a hero, and she is which automatically made me the villain. They couldn't hold both ideas in their heads at once, that their mother could be a hero at work and an emotionally absent wife at home, or that their father could love them to pieces but be dying inside the family he helped create. That was the beginning of the next 6 months. The worst 6 months of my life. My kids knew my secret, but their mother didn't. We lived in a house full of unspoken tension. Every family dinner was a farce. I'd try to act normal. My kids would give me these cold, dead-eyed stares from across the table. Sarah was too exhausted from work to notice. She'd talk about the hospital, and I'd listen, and my kids would watch me, daring me to keep up the act. It was torture. I'd try to talk to them when we were alone, to plead my case. They wouldn't have it. It was like a switch had been flipped. I was no longer Dad. I was the enemy. The whole time, Anna's pregnancy was moving forward. A new life was coming. It felt like a ticking clock, forcing me toward the inevitable. I couldn't live in that silent, hateful house anymore. I couldn't let my new child be born into this web of lies. So I finally did it. I told Sarah I needed to talk, and we sat everyone down in the living room. The same living room where I'd felt invisible for years. I laid it all out. The affair, the loneliness that led to it, and then the hardest part. I told them Anna was pregnant. Liam just stared at the floor. Maya started to cry, but they weren't sad tears. They were angry. She looked at her mother, waiting for the explosion, but it never came. Sarah just sat there for a long moment, looking at her hands. Then she looked up at me, and her face was blank. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Just okay. And then she said something that proved everything I've been feeling for years was real. She said, I think. I'm relieved. Relieved. She was relieved that our marriage was over. It was the proof. The validation. We hadn't been a real couple for so long that the end of it all was a relief to her. I turned to my kids. You see, I said, probably too desperately. This is for the best. For everyone. This isn't a tragedy. It's a reset. It's a net positive. We can finally stop pretending. That was a mistake. Maya stood up, her face flushed. A net positive. You're having a baby with another woman and destroying our family, and you call it a net positive. The dam broke. The kids yelled. I tried to defend myself. Sarah just sat there quiet, letting me take all the fire. It was a disaster. I tried to explain that the family wasn't being destroyed. It was just changing form. That the old form was already a hollow shell, but they saw it as me trying to rewrite history to paint their mother as the bad guy to excuse what I'd done. And that's how it's been ever since. I'm moving my things out now, getting ready to start this new life with Anna. A life built on honesty and actual affection. Every conversation with my kids is a minefield. When I try to tell them I still love them, that this has nothing to do with them, they call it manipulation. When I try to explain gently that their mother wasn't an easy person to be married to, that I was desperately lonely, they accuse me of spinning false narratives and trying to turn them against her. I'm not trying to take them from her. I'm trying to save them and myself from repeating the same mistakes. I want them to see what a loving, supportive partnership actually looks like. I want them to know that you don't have to settle for a quiet, sterile life where you feel more like a roommate than a partner. I know I'm the villain of this story in their eyes. Maybe I always will be. But I did this because I couldn't breathe anymore. The affair wasn't the disease. It was the symptom of a marriage that had died years ago. The new baby isn't a mistake. It's a second chance at real happiness. I'm not running away from my family. I'm trying to build a real home, a place with laughter and warmth. And I just have to pray that one day when my kids are older and have felt the sting of a lonely heart themselves, they'll understand. I pray they'll one day see the home I'm building with Anna, not as a betrayal, but as a sanctuary. The one I never had.
Story 11.
I know what he's probably told you. He's probably told everyone that I'm crazy, that I'm unstable, that I trapped him. Men like him always need a monster in the story to make themselves the hero. But our story wasn't a horror movie. It was a love story, a tragedy. And he wasn't a hero. He was a coward. My name is Alara. I'm 38 years old, and for the last 4 years, my world revolved around one man. Let's call him Alex. When he moved here to my country to be with me, it felt like destiny. It wasn't just a guy moving in with his girlfriend. It was a promise. A soul pact. We were going to build a life that was different, something real and beautiful away from the noise of the world. For that dream, I gave up everything. I used to be an actress. It was my passion, but it's a cruel industry that tells you you're worthless the moment you're not 25 anymore. I was tired of it, tired of feeling small. Alex said he understood. He said he wanted to take care of me, to give me the space to heal and build our home while he focused on his work. It sounded perfect. He would be the provider and I would be the heart of our home. So I quit. I stopped working a traditional job, yes, but I was never idle. He calls it supporting me for 2 years, like he was writing a check to a charity. He has no idea what I did. I poured my entire soul into that home. I found the apartment, I decorated it, I filled it with art and light. I was the one who made it a sanctuary, a place he could come back to after a hard day and feel peace. I cooked his meals, I managed our lives, I cleared the energy when things felt heavy. I was his emotional support, his spiritual guide, his partner in everything but name on a paycheck. That was our deal. He handled the money and I handled life. He was my whole world and I truly believed I was his. But something started to change in him. The passionate, fiery man I fell in love with started to disappear. He became quiet, controlled. He called it being calm, but it felt like a wall going up brick by brick. He stopped sharing things, stopped meeting my energy. It felt like his light was going out. And yes, we fought. He probably told you about my outbursts. They weren't outbursts. They were me throwing myself against that wall he was building, trying to smash it down and find my Alex again. I was desperate to feel him, to connect with the man I knew was still in there. I just wanted the man I loved back. Then the sickness came. That's the only way I can describe it. The first time he tried to leave it was like a possession. 1 minute we were talking about our future, and the next a complete stranger was sitting in his chair. This cold robotic person looked at me and talked about breaking up like he was deciding what to have for lunch. It was terrifying. The love was gone from his eyes. There was nothing there. I am a very spiritual person. I feel things. I see things. He used to love that about me. And in that moment, I could feel this dark energy all around him. It was like this toxic cloud of old-fashioned man-up nonsense whispering in his ear that being in a deep, connected relationship was a trap, that real men are alone and independent. It was everything our love stood against. He says I manipulated him. I didn't. I fought for him. I sat with him and I reminded him of who we were. I told him about our promises, our pact. I talked about our future, about the children I've seen so clearly in my visions. These little souls just waiting for us to be ready. I held his hands and I poured all of my love and my light into him, trying to push the darkness out. And it worked. It was like he woke up. The real Alex came back, and he was horrified. He cried and held me and couldn't believe he'd almost thrown away everything we had built. Love had won. I thought that was it. But the sickness came back. Twice more over the next year. Each time the same thing. The cold stranger would appear speaking of logistics and practicalities, and I would have to go to war for his soul again. Each time I fought. I used our memories, our love, our shared destiny as my weapons. And each time I won him back from the brink, it was exhausting. It was traumatic. But he was my soulmate. And you don't abandon your soulmate when they are under attack. You save them. I honestly believed I was strong enough to keep him safe, to keep us safe forever. I was wrong. The last time was different. The darkness that came for him wasn't a visitor anymore. It had moved in. His eyes were flat, like looking at a calm gray sea with nothing underneath. There was no flicker of the man I loved. No sign of a struggle. The stranger was in complete control. And this time, the stranger was here to finish the job. It started like the others. He said, "We need to talk," and my blood ran cold. He started using words like untenable and not sustainable. Cold corporate words to describe 4 years of a life we built with our hands and our hearts. He was talking about our love like it was a failing business he needed to shut down. For 3.5 hours I fought. I didn't beg for him to stay. I begged for him to come back. I pleaded with the real Alex, the one I knew was trapped somewhere inside that cold shell. I tried everything. I brought out old photos. I reminded him of the day we met, of the promises he'd made under the stars on our trip to Greece. I spoke of our future children, the daughter with his eyes, and my smile that I've seen so clearly. I asked him, "What about her? Are you abandoning her too?" He just stared at me, his face a mask. He said I was being manipulative. He called my visions emotional blackmail. My visions. The spiritual gifts he used to find so beautiful, so special. He was now using them as a weapon against me, twisting the most sacred parts of our connection into something ugly. It was like watching him set fire to our home room by room, with me still inside. I cried, I reasoned, I got angry. I tried every key I had, every incantation, every shared memory, but the door wouldn't open. The stranger had locked it from the inside and thrown away the key. And while my entire world was collapsing, he was talking about logistics. "I'll pack my work computer first. I need to call a taxi for the airport. My flight leaves in a few hours." He was discussing his escape plan while I was on the floor, my soul shattering into a million pieces. He called it a breakup. It wasn't. It was an amputation, and there was no anesthetic. He was cutting me out of his life, and he didn't even flinch. I watched him pack. Just his work things and a few changes of clothes. It was so clinical. He left behind the books I'd bought him, the painting we chose together, the blanket I knitted for him. He left behind everything that was us, and only took what was him. Then he stood at the door. I thought, maybe now. Maybe one last moment of clarity. I looked into his eyes, searching for a sign for my Alex. There was nothing. He just said, "Goodbye, Alara," turned around and walked out. I heard his suitcase rolling down the hallway, the elevator doors opening and closing, and then silence. A silence so loud and so final it felt like death. He left. He left me the woman who gave up her career, who moved countries for him, who built him a home and a life completely alone and with no money in the middle of a global pandemic. His home country was calling him back, and he ran to the comfort of his family, leaving a trail of destruction behind him. A few days later, the money appeared in my account. Enough for 2 months' rent and bills. I know he tells people about that. I know he frames it as some noble, generous act. See, I took care of her. It is not a noble act. It is a guilt payment. It's the bare minimum he could do to quiet the tiny part of his conscience that must have been screaming at him. It's a pittance, a small fee he paid to be able to tell his family and friends that he did the right thing, as he paints me as the crazy, unstable monster he had to escape from. 2 months. What is 2 months when you've lost your entire future? It's a slap in the face. It's him saying, "Here's some cash so you don't starve immediately. Now my responsibility is over." He didn't care what happened to me after those 2 months. He just wanted to be free. Our friends have been my saviors. They don't see a monster. They see a woman whose heart has been ripped out. They bring me food because I forget to eat. They hold me when I can't stop shaking. They listen when I tell them the whole story, not just his edited, self-serving version. They knew our love. They saw how I devoted my life to him. They know he didn't just leave a bad relationship. They know he abandoned a soul he swore he would always protect. He thinks he's free now. He thinks he's escaped. But what he doesn't understand is that he didn't escape me. He escaped love. He escaped connection. He let the sickness win. He chose the cold, safe, empty logic of the stranger over the messy, beautiful, passionate fire of the man he used to be. He ran from the only person in the world who was willing to fight the darkness for him. I don't know what will happen to me, but I know this. He wasn't the hero of this story, and I wasn't the villain. We were two people who promised to build a fortress together, and when the enemy came, he didn't fight. He just handed them the keys and ran, leaving me locked inside.